Прийшли окупанти до нас в Україну, форма новенька, воєнні машини, та трохи поплавився їх інвентар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російські танкісти сховались в кущі, щоб лаптем посьорбати довбані щі, та трохи у чах перегрівся навар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Приперли зі сходу до нас барани для восстановлення
великої страни.
Найкращий пастух баранячих отар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Їх доводи всяке озброєння різне, потужні ракети, машини залізні, у нас на всі доводи є коментар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Вони захопити хотіли нас зразу, а ми зачаїли на орків образу з російських бандитів, робить примар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Російська поліція справи заводить, там вбивцю рашистів ніяк не знаходить, хто винен, що в нашому полі глухар. Байрактар, Байрактар. Веде пропаганду кремлівський урод, слова пропаганди ковтає народ, тепер нове слово знає цар.
Байрактар.
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 Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Хотите жить – бегите. Хотите жить – сдавайтесь в плен. Россия не получит новую территорию Украины. Россия присоединит себя к той катастрофе, которую она принесла на оккупированную территорию нашей страны. Оккупант заполняет могилами захваченную территорию Украины. И все больше могил на территории самой России. Ценой того, что один человек в России хочет продолжать эту войну, кто хочет войны больше, чем жизнь. Ваши жизни, граждане России.
Русский военный корабль. Предлагаю сложить оружие и сдаться. Русский военный корабль, иди нахуй.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 581 of the news. And it's good to see you all once again. And of course, the Russians are still getting schmacked.
And of course, the Russians are getting schmacked, whacked, and absolutely cracked today. And we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of the news and talking about everything that has been going on. We have some pretty interesting videos today, and also some pretty interesting frontline analysis as well. But you know something that kind of hit me before we ran the stream tonight is that I've seen a lot more people than normal tonight when the stream was counting down to start. A lot of y'all were saying where y'all were from, and I'm not saying like your house or anything, I'm saying like the city or the country you were in. And so I was just wondering, put it in the chat where y'all are from, because I wonder where every single person who's watching the stream right now is from. And also, really quickly, another quick plug, and we've never made a plug like this, but tonight we're going to make a special exception. If y'all would like, make sure to smack that like button harder than the Russians are getting smacked daily at this point by the Ukrainian military, because that helps us to reach more people around the entirety of the internet. And Matthew be smacking them vocal cords and absolutely choking to death over there, man. He went,
Jeez, man, I was fighting for my life on that one. Good Lord, I was trying to drink some coffee and nearly choked on it.
and I'm just sitting here giving the spiel, and you're sitting over there. But anyways, we're going to be starting off the news tonight inside of the Russian... You know what? No. Actually, we're going to go do the warm-up first. We're going to go over to Uzbekistan, because many of y'all don't hear a lot about Uzbekistan. It's something that clearly isn't in the news. And by the way, the chat is going insane right now, and y'all are from everywhere. I'm seeing Jackson, Tennessee, North Wales, which we've been there. It's a beautiful place. A lot of y'all are actually from the UK. Loads of y'all are also from America. But it seems like, right... Oh, we have someone from Greece! The Fable Gamer is from Greece! That is really cool. Man, y'all are from literally everywhere. Like, I'm not even kidding. I'm not even saying that just to say it. Y'all are, like, from every corner of the United States and every corner of the world. But goodness, God, that's actually distracting me here. But anyways, I gotta keep on with
we even have people from Philly in here.
From Philly?
From Philly.
Man, I'm telling you. I don't know what made me hit that. But anyways, moving on from that and getting right on into the news, and specifically starting off in Uzbekistan, many of y'all probably don't hear a lot of news about Uzbekistan, and the reason is a good one, actually. Usually I would crap on the mainstream news right now, you know, Fox, CNN, all those folks, but there really is no reason to get a lot of news from Uzbekistan. Not a lot goes on in that corner of the world that is really international newsworthy. But one thing... And I'll share with y'all a really fun fact here, and it's fun for us, but not fun for the people over there where this is happening. But Matthew, you know the Aral Sea, right? The sea that was completely sucked dry by the Soviet Union and now exists as a husk in the modern world?
Yes, I do.
So, you know what's really cool about the Aral Sea and everything is that this actually made Uzbekistan for a little while. I believe it may even be one of the largest producers of this product today, but Uzbekistan actually ranks as one of the largest producers of cotton in the world, and it's because of the draining and diversion of Aral Sea water being moved down into this area. And all of this, everything you see down here, is actually completely watered and fueled by the Aral Sea's water up there that doesn't really exist anymore. But the Uzbeks still continue to pump large amounts of that water into the area of these cotton fields, and it allows for them to be one of the largest producers of cotton worldwide.
That's impressive.
That's actually pretty wild, especially for a country that most people have never even really heard a lot about. But one thing that was crazy today, and we don't have a lot of information or news on this, but in the, I believe it's actually the capital city of Uzbekistan. It's in a very weird spot geographically, but in the city of Tashkent, a massive explosion occurred at one of their airfields. I have to be honest with y'all, we don't know which one it is. They actually have two airports at Tashkent. They have the Tashkent International Airport here in the center of the city, and then they also have the Tashkent Eastern Airport over here, but we don't really know where the explosion actually came from. If we had to make an assumption at the moment, we would most likely take a guess that it actually was here at the Tashkent Eastern Airport, considering that this appears to be more of a military airfield than a civilian airfield like this one. And so moving y'all into it, a huge explosion, and we also have a video and a picture of it, occurred at Tashkent, and the explosion was so large that the shockwave was felt 30 kilometers away, which is about equivalent to 22 miles. When you see the explosion right there, and of course it just knocks everything off of these houses, blowing out windows, setting off car alarms. This explosion was truly on a scale that has rarely ever been seen before. And now we can see another clip, and it appears to be showing some more damage around Tashkent. And when you see cars were actually blown backwards, almost over this fence, like right there. Man, that's a strong explosion.
Very hefty explosion. That was almost like one of those size explosions like they've got going over there in, what was it?
Lebanon?
What's that country? Yeah, Lebanon.
Yeah, the Beirut explosion in, I believe it was 2019 or 2020. No, it was 2020 because the whole little plague was going around when that happened. But this was an insane explosion. And we also have a picture of the mushroom cloud. And I've got to be honest with y'all, it's probably one of the biggest explosions that we've seen in recent years occurring anywhere around the world. There's a picture of it. And it was unbelievable in size. We don't know what's caused the explosion at the moment. We don't really know how much damage has actually been caused to the entirety of Tashkent. Because unlike other instances like in Beirut, where we got to see a lot of video and picture evidence coming out immediately of the explosion and the damage that was caused to the city, we're not really getting that with Tashkent. We're really just getting a few occasional videos and pictures here and there showing the explosion and some of the damage that was caused to the city, but we really have no idea what's caused this. And the reason why we included this in the news at all tonight is because Uzbekistan and all of the Stan series countries, except for Afghanistan, kind of fall under the post-Soviet Republic world, or the Ruski Mir, that the Russians love talking about even now in the modern day. It doesn't really exist too much anymore, but Uzbekistan is one of those countries that is friendly enough with the Russians that we don't really know if this is related to the war or if this is some kind of partisan activity. Hell, there are Russian peacekeeping, quote-unquote, contingents that operate in the Stan series countries down here in Central Asia, so we don't really know if it's related to that or not, but I thought I would share it with you all because it's one of the largest explosions that has been seen in recent years anywhere in the world. I believe the only one that's gotten up to this size or was larger than it was the Beirut explosion of 2020. But moving on from that, and also I see Anthony Stark putting out probably the most valid reason right now, and I don't mean to say valid like a lot of people say nowadays that are really vapid and fake sounding, but it's a pretty valid reason. It could be a fertilizer explosion, and that's usually where some of the largest and most powerful explosions ever seen come from. Believe it or not, it's actually from fertilizer. So that may be what caused it at Tashkent. Once again, they do have a massive agricultural industry that revolves around their cotton production over here on the eastern side of the country. But then that begs the question, why in the world would that much fertilizer be in Tashkent, where there isn't really that much agricultural activity as compared to out here in the eastern part of the country, where there is a lot of agricultural activity revolving around cotton? That we don't really know, but we do know of the massive explosion that occurred at Tashkent. We just don't know the exact details at this moment. Chances are it was possibly a fertilizer explosion, an ammunition depot explosion, or an unknown kind of explosion that we don't really know the source of. But moving on from that little bit of news in Uzbekistan, which was very interesting, we're now going to be moving on into Russia. And Russia has made a very interesting statement today. We all know the Russians are just on the cusp of winning this war. We all know that deep down inside. At least that's what the Russian bots want us to think. And every single day, we're just getting closer and closer to that inevitable Russian victory. With every 2 steps they're taking back, they're taking another 4 steps back the next day. And we know that with that kind of a running pace, they've got to eventually pull back out of Ukraine so far that it becomes an inverse, and then they end up taking over all of Ukraine in a single day. That's just how wars work, y'all. Look at history. Look at history and every single war that's been fought. I mean, hell, look at the Nazis in World War II. I mean, hell, they eventually just imploded on themselves, and guess what? Guess what? They lost. Just like, in all seriousness, getting out of the joke, they just kind of lost. And the Russians are obviously not winning this war at this point. They are not gaining any ground. They're just in the process of losing all of their ground. But one thing was really interesting. Russians made a very optimistic statement today, and another one of those Ministry of Defense reports and meetings that they love to have over Skype. And I'll be letting y'all hear this because it is absolutely shocking to the core. Such cynical actions by the West and their henchmen in Kyiv are only pushing Ukraine towards self-destruction. In these circumstances, we continue to build up the combat power of the armed forces, in particular by supplying modern weapons and improving the training of troops, taking into account the experience of the special military operation. The consistent implementation of the measures in the action plan until 2025 will make it possible to achieve the planned goals. Well, damn, they just went from
it went from 3 days, a 3-day war, to
3 years,
a multi-year war.
It went from 3 days.
How's that math not mathing, though?
That math ain't mathing, man. It ain't adding up. And I love how it went, Matthew. Literally from 3 days to 3 years now. And they are planning on this being the longest war. The problem is that, and also this isn't the problem, but Anton Gerashenko pointed out the problem, which was a very good observation. The Russians probably won't exist economically by 2025. Their economy has largely been cut off from really any purchaser that had any power. You see, the Russians are, and I don't want to say this because this would actually be an incorrect statement, the Russians have found purchasers of their oils and raw materials. They have found that in the Indians and the Chinese. The problem, however, is that the Indians and the Chinese are buying their oils and raw materials at such a cheap price that the Russians are hardly even breaking even on extracting these resources at the moment. And so while they're kind of keeping afloat, they're not doing like they were when they were selling most of their raw materials, oils, natural gases, such things like that, to Western countries that had a lot more money and paid a bit of a higher price for that kind of goods. We're not seeing that. And so the Russians, from what we understand, and also what we're seeing on the economic side of things, with the ruble passing 100 rubles per dollar as the exchange rate, the Russian economy probably just won't be able to last until 2025. If they are going to try and fight a war that long, they're going to need a freaking miracle. They're going to need to find a gold mine inside of Russia that is producing more gold than the rest of the world, or they're going to have the Chinese back them up and World War III will have to begin. One or the other, because outside of those things, there is no way in hell the Russians will economically be able to last until 2025. Now, militarily, it actually is possible. If we remove the economic side of things out of the picture, it's entirely possible that the Russians could just continue to partially mobilize and cannibalize all of their old decaying Soviet equipment and somehow keep an army running until 2025. It obviously wouldn't be effective by that point, seeing that they don't have any modern weapons that are being introduced onto the battlefield that are brand new. There's no shot in hell that by 2025 there would even be a modern piece of equipment in most units. Most of the stuff would probably be from the 60s and the 70s. But nevertheless, it would be possible outside of the economic sphere to probably try and keep the Russian military alive somehow by 2025. But the economy will not survive that long. That's a guarantee. The Russians will collapse economically before 2025. At this going rate, we're expecting that's going to be some point in between mid to late of next year, so 2024. So they'll probably collapse about a year ahead of how long they're expecting this war to go on by this point. But I love the optimism. And they keep on telling the Russian public, We are winning this war. They keep on telling that. And then, you know what they do? They sit there and say, the war is going to go on a little bit longer. And that's just a completely opposite statement of what's going on. If they were winning the war, why isn't the war going to be won sooner than they expected? You know, when you're winning a war, the timetable is shortening each time. You sit there and go, oh, we'll win this in 2 years. And then a month later, you say, actually, it looks like we're going to win it in a year. And then a month after that, you say, it looks like we're going to be winning this in a few months. That's what winning looks like. Winning doesn't look like, hey, guys, we're fighting this war. And then a month later, you sit there and say, actually, it's going to take about another year or two from now. That's not winning. And they're pushing it to the Russian public that this is winning the war. It's just impossible. There's no way in hell. And it's hilarious to see that now the Russian Ministry of Defense has a very good grasp of reality. There is no way that this war is going to be won. That statement largely confirms that, because the Ministry of Defense probably has a fairly good understanding that the Russian economy is in shambles and there's not much that can keep it running beyond this point. Speaking of which,
You know, if Russia had any sense, they would try to go ahead and make peace right now with Ukraine and end this whole situation in the war. Because if they keep fighting and they keep losing their military equipment and people, that plays exactly into the West's hands. That's what the U.S. is trying to do, essentially, by arming Ukraine. We want Ukraine to win, but the ultimate goal is to wear down Russia, take away their equipment and all their stuff, so that way they're not as a formidable enemy as they used to be. But Russia's going to keep playing right into our hands by fighting this war that they're not going to win. And at this point, I think they know it.
I think they do know it, and there's just there's no reason to even go into like a massive deep in-depth discussion at this point, to me, because it is so clear at this point that even the Russian government at the highest level understands that this is an unwinnable war, but they are dogged determined to keep the war going until they collapse. And that's playing right into the West's hands. I mean, that's actually what the United States probably wants out of this whole thing, is for the Russians to be so crippled by the end of the war that there is no chance in hell that they could ever be considered a rival of the West except for its nuclear armament. And even then, I have a feeling that the nuclear armament will probably be in such a bad state of disrepair because of the lack of funds of the Russian government and the lack of economic activity, that we'll probably have to do what we did in the 90s again, which is to step up and tell the Russians, we will pay to dismantle these nuclear weapons, so that way we don't end up having radioactive contaminants seeping into the oceans and also into the ground, and contaminating water tables all over the world because you're not maintaining the nuclear weapons. That might be what we end up doing, and that would be a win-win. That would be amazing, because think about it. We're knocking a rival out of the sphere of influence of any kind in the world permanently at that point. They would probably never recover economically, strategically, in any sort of way beyond that point for decades, maybe even a century. And so, hey, we're doing quite good. The Russians are playing right into the trap. So I got to say, huge respect to the Russians for working with the United States. They mean they're going to wear their country into the ground, even when they know it's not possible to win this war at this point. Moving on from that, however, the situation is also just quite bad on the person-to-person basis inside the Russian Federation and on the military level. The Russians decided to award a Russian soldier for his bravery in the field. And to give you all a little bit of a quick explanation before you even see the... Well, actually, I'm going to show you all the picture and then give you all the explanation. This picture looks kind of weird. And I don't know if many of y'all can tell why. It's because this guy has actually been photoshopped into the picture. The reason being is that this guy is actually severely wounded when they're giving him the medal, and so instead of, waiting for him to get better and then giving him the medal, they had to get the propaganda photo shoot in this area as fast as possible. This was in the Bashkiria Oblast of Russia. So what they did is they got the guy, the commissar, with the medal. He just stood in the room, took the picture alone, and then they photoshopped the other guy in. And what's even worse about this is that this guy actually ended up subsequently dying from his injuries in the hospital that he was already suffering from, and that was the reason why they photoshopped him into the picture. So you can tell that this was a little bit of a propaganda photo shoot, and of course it's showing that things are certainly not going well inside of the Russian Federation, even on the military level, because now they're trying anything desperately to make the situation look a little bit better than it is. And a lot of people are once again throwing up the Weekend at Bernie's meme, and I think that's going to start becoming a very common thing, is Weekend at Bernie's. Bert and Ernie's. But anyways, moving on from that little clip of news and sign of Russia, and moving on out of that weirdness and bizarreness, we're now going to be moving on into Ukraine already because we didn't really have a massive amount of international news to cover. But going on into our location unknowns, we have some really interesting ones today, starting off with a video of a Ukrainian S-300 surface-to-air missile system firing. And I think, yep, we're going to have to mute that because we got the techno remix. But we
That's
can see
Mortal Kombat.
oh yeah, it is. I don't even know why I did not recognize that, probably because I never played the game. But we can see the S-300 firing, shooting off into the sky, and then going towards its target, hopefully to hit it. And we see it doing its thing. Oh, get him! And we didn't get to see it hit the air target, but still great to see Ukrainian surface-to-air missile systems working. The Russians have S-400 surface-to-air missile systems. The Ukrainians only have the S-300 from what I understand. And while the S-300 is an older system, it still is a fairly competent surface-to-air missile system. While the Russians do a lot of things poorly, surface-to-air missile defense systems are one of the few things that they are actually largely on par with the Western world at, or even in some regards, in certain aspects, probably a little bit better. And the reason why is because back in the day, when the Soviet Union was, of course, facing down the entire Western world, it was understood by the Soviet Union that there was really no realistic way that the Soviet Air Force would be able to stand up against Western air power, specifically just the U.S. Air Force alone. And so it was decided that to find some way to fight the U.S. Air Force, they would have to do the complete opposite, which is instead of fighting against the Air Force in the skies, they were going to fight the U.S. Air Force from the ground. And so they started to put a lot of research and development into their surface-to-air missile defense systems, and that's why even to this day, the mere mention of an S-400 surface-to-air missile system or an S-300 being in an area seems to throw up a lot of apprehensions from a lot of people in the military analysis world, because it's really the only thing they did good at, and the Soviets knew, and the Russians know as well, that if anything would be their only hope of trying to stop U.S. air power from dominating them, it would probably be the surface-to-air missile sites. Even then, the United States, of course, with our massive amounts of research and development budgets that we give to the military, then came up with anti-radar missiles called an anti-radiation missile like the AGM-88 HARM, that's entire job is to find the radars that operate those surface-to-air missile systems and destroy them. And so largely, while a lot more effective than most surface-to-air missile systems, they are still pretty poo-poo because the U.S. and most of the Western world has missiles that are specifically made to blind those surface-to-air missile systems. I've said surface-to-air missile systems so many times, I'm getting confused with what I'm even saying. But moving on from that...
The missile knows where it is because it knows where it isn't. And the missile knows where it's going because it knows where it's going.
Man, I'm telling you, and Brett Smashy got it just right. HARM missiles would shred them. And also, hell, even not just the HARM missiles, one thing that the U.S. has now that is largely purpose-made to go up against SAM sites is the Rapid Dragon missile delivery system, where we just drop about a dozen independent missiles out of the back of a C-130, and each of them are stealth, and each of them can fly about 600 miles into enemy territory. And so going off of that, a single C-130 has the potential, with a 100% success rate, of destroying 12 SAM sites in a single go, as long as they're within 500 miles of where those missiles were dropped. And with S-400s only having a range of about 150 to 160 miles, that C-130 can drop those missiles off in such a safe airspace that there is no threat to the C-130 or the C-130 crew either. So, you know, you get a pretty good idea. We have created a way to defend against surface-to-air missile systems like the S-300 and S-400. But for countries that aren't the United States, or aren't Germany, France, or Britain, or Japan, or South Korea, or Australia, or New Zealand, you know, you get the point. Pretty much everyone outside the Western world, if you're not in the Western world and you don't have those kinds of systems, those surface-to-air missile batteries can actually be a little difficult to deal with. And hopefully we'll see that once the Ukrainians get the F-16s, which can actually use the AGM-88 HARMs properly, that their siege missions will be much more successful than they are now. Moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see a Ukrainian tank platoon moving along a tree line. And we can see that it's in slow motion here, but this guy's on top of a T-72B with his commanders sitting right alongside him, giving a little smirk. He went, amateur. And he just looked back up front and started putting on his goggles. And oh man, that's a beautiful field.
That is the field right there. Like when the sky's actually blue and it's like a sunny day, they'd like take a picture of, like, have the Ukrainian flag, like the blue and the yellow going on.
Yeah, I wouldn't, you know, are those dandelions or something? I don't know what kind of flowers those are, but it's beautiful out there.
It is.
Just look at that. Man, imagine having a normal camo pattern and standing in that field. You would stand out like a sore thumb. You would stand.
Man, you would.
But when you see the first tank in the column came to a stop, sorry, actually, I said these were T-72s. That actually looks like a T-64BV up there instead. So these may be T-64s, but nevertheless, really nice to see their little column moving along. Beautiful scenery. And that's one thing that's always just blowing me away every single day in this war, is that while the Ukrainians are fighting one of the most horrendous wars, the conventional wars that has been seen on the continent of Europe since World War II, at the same time, they're fighting in such beautiful landscapes that if it wasn't for the war, this would be a place that a lot of people would go to have a picnic or something similar. And also, I see a lot of people saying what kind of a thing that is in the field, and we are not repeating that at all on stream. The guidelines...
I didn't know what people were referencing for a minute. I was like, what is that? What are people talking about?
Well, what the hell happened right there? But anyways... Did you see that? Oh my.
I did. It went black for a second.
Dude, everything went black on both screens. I was like, oh my god. But anyways, moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see the Ukrainians training on the F-16. Now, many of y'all are going to be shocked. I was very shocked watching this video today on what the training actually looks like, because many of y'all might be very close, depending on how far you get in flight simulators, to being on this level of training. Also, by the way, we're going to take a chance here. The music in this video is probably not copyright free. I'm going to take a guess, because for some reason, licenses are something that the Ukrainians really don't focus on with the videos. But nevertheless, we're going to play it. So if you are watching this stream later and an ad's running on it, and you're going, why is an ad running on an Enforcer stream? He said that would never happen. It's probably because this video got copyrighted by some copyright holder and they're running an ad on it. But anyways, we're going to let the video play. What? Wait, hang on. Oh, hold up. Is that an Su-30? Hang on, let me go pull up if the Ukrainians even have any. Ukraine Air Force equipment. There's no way that they have a Su-30. I don't think they have them. Let's see here. Attack, Su-25, Su-27. Anyway. Nah, that should be an Su-27. Maybe a tandem seat Su-27. I've got to be honest, the tandem seat Su-27s actually look a lot better, in my opinion, than the single-seaters, but anyways.
Всі ми розуміємо, що майбутнє за літаками F-16 або іншого типу, які нам нададуть партнери. Так що
Hey, this guy's name is Andrew.
Oh, it is? Is that Ukrainian Andrew?
It's Andriy, or Andrew. I think it's their equivalent of Andrew. That's really cool.
Вивчати обладнання кабіни, систему озброєння та його застосування.
That dude is rather young to be flying that jet.
That's what I was thinking. I wasn't going to say that. I was like, man, this guy looks like he's like younger than us.
You're like 16 or something.
Я вам покажу.
Dude, he went straight out of grade school and he went into getting some A's up in the sky, you know, aces.
Yeah.
Ну і можливо, ви теж спробуєте.
Oh, we got
Look
a
at that
goose.
dude rocking the mustache. Look
Dude,
at
this
that.
guy looks like he's straight from Top Gun. Respect, though. I love that. But here goes the training.
Target 1-1.
Oh my god, dude, we could do this. We could do this, man. It's DCS World, and they got the like. So to let y'all know this, years ago, I was actually trying to get big into DCS World, and so I ended up buying one of those $300 sets with the joystick and throttle control toggles, and that looks to be about the same controllers that I have. So I could whip this out. Also have a VR headset that I got years ago. It's one of the older HTC Vives, I believe. But I could whip all this on. We could train like a Ukrainian pilot. But I gotta say, this was really cool.
They got the play seat, they got the Thrustmaster controllers, the Logitech. Man, they're like kitted out just like a gamer. Look at Goose back there. He's like, "What you doing, man?" Man,
when these Ukrainian pilots aren't taking down Russian jets in the skies over Ukraine, they're taking down noobs in the lobbies of DCS World. Dude, these guys are sitting there shooting some guy down in an F-14A on the Georgian lobby, and then they sit there and go, "Dude, that's BS, man." And they sit there, get better scrum. And they're just like crapping on people. It's training.
Roger.
Oh man.
Yep.
Pretty nice little computer lab they got there. Oh my god, that is literally DCS World. That's the same markers they have and everything in DCS. They are literally.
Are they on multiplayer?
No. This is I've actually played a mission like this before. This is the like AI mission where there's just enemy aircraft coming at you. You're in a squad and you have to take them down. But this is literally DCS World that y'all are watching right here. If y'all don't know what DCS World is, I'm gonna have to fill y'all in here for a quick minute. DCS World is a online digital combat simulator world. That's what DCS World stands for. And they have a load of accurately modeled aircraft in their game. Just a few, for example. The F-15E Strike Eagle is in the game. They also have the F-A-18 Hornet. They also have the F-16C Viper, which the Ukrainians are probably very interested in that flight model. They also have the MiG-29, the Su-27. You name it, they largely have it if it's a modern aircraft. And I believe they're currently putting the Eurofighter Typhoon into the game as well. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you load up DCS World, you know what it says, Matthew, in the loading screen?
It says don't use it for training.
Yeah, they say do not use it for training. This is not a military aircraft simulator. And yet it's good enough. And I'm telling you, this game is top notch. That disclaimer is pretty much pointless.
Oh, they're just saying that to cover their butts legally, but that thing is like a 1-to-1 replica. Like I'm convinced that you could probably learn how to fly the plane perfectly fine on DCS. I'm sure it feels a lot different when you're actually in it because you have to fight the G-forces and everything, but you could totally learn how to do it just from the video game.
Oh yeah, all you would need is a multi-million-dollar centrifuge, and then you would be fine. You would
That's
be good.
all.
But this is literally DCS World, which is nuts to see them training on a video game that most of y'all can get.
Magnum 2. Все, йди за групою. Все, полетіли. Ракети.
Man, it's literally DCS World on the Georgian map, which is supposed to simulate the Georgian war with the Russians from 2008 to 2009. Dude, they've got the whole 9 yards, man.
Мають нам не прив'язуватись до конкретних локацій, не прив'язуватись до часу, оптимально використовувати ті вільні хвилини для навчання, для того, щоб перенавчитися на літак наших партнерів.
Складається з ручки керування літаком. Є невеличка відмінність, що вона знаходиться праворуч, і це більше йде як стік, як джойстик для керування літаком.
Dude, I swear that man was just in a flat spin right there, like in the game. Look at that.
І це більше йде як стік.
Oh, wait a minute, no, that's just his head movement. He was doing a roll and he was moving his head around.
В нас вона знаходиться по центру. Складається з очків віртуальної реальності, з ручки керування двигуном, root, і далі монітор, та також системники і педалі.
Якщо говорити конкретно про літаки F-16, це виконання практичних польотів на даних системах, як одиночно, так і в групі, при цьому льотчики можуть знаходитись в будь-якій точці України. Маючи цей досвід і отримуючи ці знання, льотчики після цього вибувають в наші країни-партнери, що скорочує тривалість підготовки там за кордоном.
Авіаційні симулятори уже
And we see more instructors talking about it while our boy is back there on the headset. He's doing his thing.
В майбутньому пілотам уже із знанням англійської мови, із володінням візуальних навіть навичок швидше опановувати західні винищувачі, перебуваючи вже в Європі чи в Сполучених Штатах Америки.
Yeah, I gotta say, that's just crazy.
That is crazy. I can already hear the trolls saying, look, Ukraine's playing video games, aren't you fighting the war?
But dude, in all seriousness, man, all the folks when we were growing up that said war isn't a video game, well, strap yourselves in, bud. It's a video game. Like, people are training to go to war on video games. And this is no joke. This is actually how they're training pilots. I don't know if this is how they're trying to get some of them familiar with the F-16, because it looks like they're using an F-16 in-game. But a lot of them are also Su-27 pilots. I don't know. Maybe they're refreshing their piloting skills, just trying to get in a little bit of practice or something, but they're using an actual legitimate video game to do it.
Man, we should buy him the F-35 DLC because maybe one day they'll get them.
Oh no, man, we need to get them that Eurofighter Typhoon DLC and the Gripen DLC, because those are actually ones that are in game, and maybe they'll get them one day, so maybe they'll be ready.
Програму, яка дозволяє пілоту сприймати ту реальність, вони відповідають реальним картам території України, окупованої території, тому пілоти літають фактично по тій місцевості, яку добре знають.
Як для першого разу, то взагалі чудово.
And now you see them showing their Su-27 with the R-24s under. You now see the pilot hopping in. And you see it's a bit of a climb to get up there in the cockpit. It's like a freaking 2-story building with how tall this thing
У
is.
нас тут досить багато перемикачів. Майже всіма перемикачами ми користуємось. В літаках F-16 стоять цифрові прилади та декілька аналогових. У нас взагалі кучу перемикачів, які, в принципі, можна було б звести все в одну систему жидкокристалічних дисплеїв, які будуть видавати цю всю інформацію. Тому що у більшості випадків ти ним користуєшся дуже рідко. На даному етапі винищувальна авіація виконує
Dang, just a view of the snout real quick.
Yeah.
авіації, також
That's what it did. I was like,
нанесення
oh, okay.
бомбових ударах по позиціях. Літак F-16 це значно спростив би, тому що дальність застосування зброї у нього значно більша.
Oh
Там
man,
все
those
більш
F-16s look clean, and for some reason they really have a preference for the ones with the conformal fuel tanks, you know, which are these giant, like blocky-looking additions to the top of the fuselage. Those are actually external fuel tanks that conform to the shape of the fuselage and cut down significantly on drag. So pretty cool little addition there. A fairly modern one as well. I don't know if any of the F-16s that the Ukrainians will be getting will be able to mount these. I'm not really sure if the older variants of the F-16 can attach these to the aircraft. I think it's the newer variants that can, but I don't really know.
сучасніше. Ми застосовуємо наші радянські Р-27, Р-73, а також західну зброю, такі ракети, як AGM
We can see, and then we can see the AGM-88 HARM right there, the anti-radiation missile that can combat an S-400 or a surface-to-air missile system.
такі ракети, як
But of course, no Soviet aircraft was made to really use them.
Man, you know that's got to be cool just to be able to like jump in the jet and go fly the thing like that.
Oh, that
like
would-
it seems a lot less restrictive than the U.S.'s like flying of military aircraft. Like they just go jump in them on the runway and just take off.
Oh man, you know it's got to be a fun job to be a pilot. Of course, a dangerous job, like every job, but still an amazingly fun one at the same time. But really cool to see the training that some Ukrainian pilots are going under, which is DCS World, which was just absolutely mind-blowing to me. And some people said it's the military version of DCS World, and from what I understand, correct me if I am wrong, I don't think there is a military version of DCS World. There is just DCS World for the public, and that's it. But I think I might be mistaken on that a little bit, so correct me if I am wrong. But moving on from that and on into our next clip, we also got to see some pictures of a captured T-80 in service with the Ukrainian army. We're waiting for that to load. I don't know what it is tonight. The little wonky things are happening here and there. And also, correction, it's actually a T-72B3. But the way they modified it, I thought it was a T-80U with the little rubber flaps here right below the ERA tiles. But this is a T-72B3 that was captured near Chernihiv last year in 2022 that had damage to its transmission, the right side, and the commander's station as it was hit by a high-explosive anti-tank shell. The Ukrainians, of course, refitted, repaired the T-72, got it back into service, and this is what it looks like now in Ukrainian service. And I gotta say, they did a pretty good job getting it back up and running. It is, of course, a T-72 as they come. All of them are largely the same, but they did add a couple of extra armor modifications that does make it slightly beefier. Still, really, really cool tank, and wonderful to know that the Ukrainians are always looking for ways to capture Russian tanks and then push them back into service on their side, of course, mitigating the overall casualties that they're sustaining. But moving on from that, it's now time for us to get on into the Russian casualty report as well. And the losses were actually a little low today in most categories, but...
Oh, they got two, though. They got two. Very nice. And also, they changed up the font or something here. They added the submarines to it.
They did.
Has that been on there for days?
No, this is the first day I've ever seen it on here that the submarine has been added. But still, great to see that they were able to destroy two special equipment vehicles. But beyond that, the losses in some categories have been somewhat low compared to about the last week. 320 Russian soldiers were knocked out over the past 24 hours. That is actually a somewhat low number, probably one of the lower ones that we've seen on a single day of the war. We also saw that 4 armored personnel carriers were knocked out, which is an okay number, but still quite low compared to the past week and a half. We did see, however, that the supply trucks being destroyed was quite high. 29 supply trucks destroyed in 24 hours, which is, of course, absolutely amazing. 3 main battle tanks were destroyed, not the highest that we've seen, but still a fairly decent number. 38 artillery systems were destroyed over the past 24 hours. So in the gist right now, it appears that supply truck and artillery system losses were, of course, very high, but every other loss was somewhat lower. 21 drones were also destroyed, and one anti-aircraft system was also destroyed as well. Beyond the supply trucks and the artillery, which were incredibly high today, most of the losses in other categories were somewhat low, and we don't really know how to explain this one today. I don't know if it's because Ukrainian forces are regrouping in some areas of the offensive. I don't know if it's because in their attempts to push forward, they're not being as effective at wiping out Russian forces as they would have been. I'm not entirely sure, but the losses today are a little bit lower in some categories than normal, especially in frontline equipment outside of the artillery, but beyond that, it's still a fairly decent day for the Ukrainian armed forces, as they are still making gains pushing forward on the battlefield. Moving on from that, now the Russian casualty report, it's now time for us to move on to the front line itself. And there's actually been a lot of news that came out of Bakhmut today for some reason, and it looks like the fighting was the heaviest around the city of Bakhmut today than it ever has been over about the past 2 weeks. But before we move on into that, we have to look into the live chat for just a minute, because so many of y'all are going insane down there. And a lot of you, and when I say insane, I mean that in a great way, because y'all have been typing up a storm in the live chat. It's literally like a hurricane down there. And a lot of y'all have been saying
insane.
All kinds of interesting things. I mean, the chat has not slowed down at all tonight. And if you like that, if you respect it, make sure to put an LSA in the live chat, because we would love to see that the Lee Spring Army is strong tonight in the live chat. But beyond that, there has been a load of stuff that people have been talking about and have been speaking of, both in Tashkent, Uzbekistan, which might be attached to the war, we're not entirely sure at the moment, and everything that's been going on in between Ukraine, Russia, and the rest of the world, that I've got to see what you all have been saying. And also, I just saw... just to call out something I saw from the live chat, Oildale Commando said, "Greetings from Bakersfield, California," which is a really cool place. It's actually, I believe, way down in Southern California, down here somewhere. Yeah, there it is, actually. There's Bakersfield, California. So hello there to Bakersfield, California. But with that, let's hear it, Matthew. What do we got?
All right, so we're jumping into our first poll and question segment. And as always, we still love the polls. And the first one says, Ukraine says Wagner's quote-unquote return to Ukraine is just a distraction from Ukraine's success. And what are your thoughts? 41% said Ukraine is right, it's only a distraction. 29% said, are they really back though? 21% said Wagner has nonetheless returned. And 9% said unsure. And on this one, I am not totally sure exactly what position Ukraine is taking on whether or not Wagner is actually back. I think we can all agree at this point that Wagner, as it was, has probably ceased to exist. It is definitely not the organization that it once was, to say the least, because Prigozhin's dead, and also it kind of fell apart. And they were hanging out in Belarus, but now they're kind of scattered all over the place. But it does seem to me like some Wagner fighters have returned to Ukraine under different names or different units, because they're simply displaced fighters at this point. So they have to go somewhere. To say it's a complete distraction, I'm not sure if that's a totally fair statement to make, because if they are back, there's no reason to get defensive about it. You can simply acknowledge that they're back and that they'll be taken care of, and that's that. But Ukraine seems to be a little bit upset at the contention that that Wagner might be back in their country. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say the Wagner is not back in the way a lot of people are trying to make it out to be. A lot of people are making it sound like the Wagner, the Chernovakna Wagner is back, and it's not. The Wagner soldiers that were once fighting under Prigozhin will be returning to Ukraine under the command of the Russian Federation directly as a part of the Russian army. There will not be, from what I understand, an existent Wagner group separate from the Russian army. It will be guys who are in the Russian army that were once a part of the Wagner. The Wagner is gone. Prigozhin is dead. It has dissolved about a month and a half ago at this point, I believe, and I do not think we're ever going to see an actual proper return of the Wagner. Y'all also have to remember that the Russians have declared officially that the Wagner ceased to exist. They made that an actual government statement. They said the Wagner never existed. They bulldozed the cemeteries that Wagner had. They got rid of their leader. They even said that they were an illegal terrorist group. And so it wouldn't make a lot of sense for them to say that and then bring them back from the dead as a fighting unit. That would be like the United States saying, hey guys, look, we've finally gotten rid of Al-Qaeda, and then creating a liberation army in Iraq in the early 2000s called Al-Qaeda. That would make no sense. We destroyed Al-Qaeda. Why in the world would they be brought back? And that's probably what the Russians are going to be doing as well. They're probably going to be bringing Wagner fighters back into the war, but we're not going to see the Chernovakna Wagner return like it once existed. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
What's the Chernovakna part mean, by the way?
I really have no idea. Like, it's like, I guess it's some cool thing to add to the front. If any of y'all know what Chernovakna Wagner means, like the whole thing, let me know, because because I got used to calling it the Wagner, and then you started hearing Prigozhin nutsack talk about it, and he would say, "Oh, the boss, the Chernovakna Wagner," and he always would say that, and I was like, what the hell does Chernovakna stand for? I don't know. But to be honest with you, Matthew, to answer your question, I absolutely have no idea. It's just a part of the name, I guess.
Interesting. It must mean hungry soldiers or something like that. Chernovagna means hungry or starving or something like that.
Poor, broke.
Yeah, any of the negative adjectives would probably work. But anyways, moving on to our next poll question. It says, assuming Russia's leadership knows they will lose the war, why don't they settle it now? 40% said because Putin is absolutely obsessed. 36% said they are in too deep militarily. 21% said the Russian public would overthrow Putin. And 3% said unsure. And on this one, I would say that Russia is not in too deep militarily because they could come to a peace agreement that is acceptable and fair to Ukraine, which means getting the hell out of their territory, but they won't. I think it's solely because Putin is absolutely obsessed with Ukraine. He has some personal motivation for doing what he's done because it made no logical sense to go invade Ukraine at all because the West was obviously going to support them like we are right now, and it was going to be a losing fight. I don't think anybody in their right mind, except for some misguided generals and some misguided analysts, thought this war would actually only take 3 days. That was a complete inaccurate statement to make, and it turned out to be completely false. And we're learning today that it's going to be many, many, many years, probably more than 3 years. Even though the Russians are saying it's only going to take 3, it's going to be longer than that, unless Russia suddenly collapses. So I would say it's solely because of Putin. He wants to go in Ukraine and hurt and harm people because he has some personal vendetta against the country. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would largely have to agree with what you said there. I think it's mostly a vendetta against Ukraine, because considering that they know now, they very well understand that their strategic aims will never be accomplished in Ukraine. They will just be dragging on this war to an inevitable defeat. Because if the Russians knew they were going to win, why in the world would they say clearly that they're planning to go until 2025? And that shows that they're planning on losing. Because they're in a defensive war right now. All of their strategic actions on the battlefield are delaying actions against the Ukrainian army's advance at this point. There's no offensives going on. So that means that they're planning on trying to hold a defensive war for about 2 years and hope that the West gives up. That's what they're hoping for right now. So they know the strategic aim of winning in Ukraine will not happen. They're just waiting out and hoping that the West will give up in supporting Ukraine. That's what they're going to be waiting for. So I think that it might be a personal vendetta, because beyond that, there is no reason to be in Ukraine anymore. It's obviously become an untenable goal for the Russians. So I would agree with Matthew 100%. There is some kind of a personal vendetta that Putin has against Ukraine, but what is that vendetta? I wouldn't know. And so with that,
I've heard theories that, I don't know the full story on this, so I can't tell you every single detail, but Putin's father died fighting in one of the wars with the countries around Russia. I can't remember. I think he died in Crimea, right?
Putin's dad?
Yeah, Putin's dad, I believe, died in some war, either with Crimea or down there in that area, or somewhere around the area. But let me do some looking real quick. Let me do a quick search to find out.
His dad died in 1999, so I don't think that would be possible, because he died in St. Petersburg.
Let me double check that real quick. Let's see here.
I think it was his grandfather, maybe.
Maybe his grandfather. But anyway, whoever it was, I've heard one of Putin's family members had died either in Crimea or somewhere around Ukraine fighting some war or fight. And maybe that's the reason or motivation for why Putin is doing what he's doing in Ukraine, because he swore to avenge his family member by going back and getting revenge on them. That's just a theory out there. I'm not sure how much validity it has behind it, because we don't even know if it's his father or his grandfather or what. But that's one possible motivation, because it has to be something personal, because why else would he go invade Ukraine? What benefit to Russia does it have to do that? Because they're not keeping NATO back, because NATO is going to come in now and support Ukraine and set up basically a military situation there that's going to be right up next to Russia's border. And nothing has been done by the invasion that helped Russia whatsoever except wreck their economy. So clearly something personal behind the scenes.
So interestingly enough, it wasn't his granddad either. So I think that theory might just be moot, because I can't find any of his family members that died in any war. But this is actually quite bizarre. I don't know if any of y'all knew this. This is news to me. Putin's granddad, Spiridon Ivanovich Putin, was actually the personal chef for Vladimir Lenin and Joseph Stalin.
What?
I can't believe that either, but that's the actual story. He was the official personal chef of Lenin and Stalin.
Oh, okay. Now, also, that's a very curious fact, but also, by the way, I think I'm starting to get an idea of where this theory came from that some people are perpetrating. It looks to be Russian misinformation because it looks like it might have originated from Russia's Channel 1 that reported Putin's father was killed while breaking the Leningrad siege. So it could be something being perpetrated by Russia to make it look like Putin had a personal reason for doing so. Maybe that works to their advantage for propaganda reasons. But it doesn't appear to be rooted in fact because, like you said, apparently his father did not die in that context.
Yeah, he died in 1999 in St. Petersburg, so if he was breaking the siege of St. Petersburg, he was breaking it against some Gopniks that were trying to rob a bank or something, because by that point, World War II had been over for like 50 years. But beyond that, something that is really interesting to me, and someone actually brought it up in the live chat, and I'm like, that's a good point. Apparently, cooks in Russia have the best chance of getting themselves ahead in life, or at least their family, because considering that Spiridon Putin was a chef for Lenin and Stalin, you know he had to have made some kind of connections in the Politburo at some point because of that. You know, there's no way you couldn't have.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. You gotta be in there cooking for him, you know, to get in their good graces.
Man, in Russia, the phrase "wait, let him cook" means a lot more than it does in the West. It really does. But with that,
You let them cook long enough, and they'll create a private military.
man, you let them cook long enough, and they'll try and overthrow the government and make themselves the leader. And sometimes they succeed, and sometimes they fail. Now, wait a minute, hang on. We gotta go through this completely. Joseph Stalin. Okay, now hear me out, everyone. Hear me out. Let's go to his early life section. Okay, revolution, rise of the look at him, cheeky.
Man, why does he look like why does he look like
why does he look like Walt
Kramer
Disney
or somebody? I don't know. He looks like a lot of different people in this photo right here.
Dude, he looks like Chuck E.
How's he
Cheese.
holding that cigarette, by the way? Is that a joint?
Dude, he be smoking the doobie.
Damn.
Oh my lord, man, Stalin was a baller. But anyways, let's see here. Oh damn, dude, he had an afro.
Jeez, man, this dude's look at that communist drip.
Man, he's got that Mandarin collar going on. I mean, he's got the whole commie drip thing going on here. But let's see. I need to find out if he was a damn cook. I know he was supposed to go to seminary school, but did he ever cook it at any point of his life? Hang on, let me pull this off screen. Joseph Stalin, did he cook? Did he cook? Let's see. So I'm looking. So apparently Stalin never cooked in his life. Ever, period. So apparently being a cook gets you way up there in Russia, but it's not always the case that you have to be a cook to make it far. But anyways, moving on from that, let's get on to the next one.
All right, so that was our last poll, so we're moving into our Super Chat questions. And up first, we have a $50 donation from, guess who? Hal Rose, channel legend. And thank you very much, Hal, for that support. And he said, Enforcer Matt, Sevastopol Harbor is no stranger to conflict, and in 1867, when the writer Mark Twain stopped by, he saw rubble everywhere, with cannonballs still stuck in the walls from a visit by the Ottoman Empire a decade before. And pick a question from chat.
And thank you so much for the support, Hal Rose. And also, that's really cool. Mark Twain stopped by Sevastopol in 1867. My boy was sitting there, man. The Civil War just got done with in America, and he went, wow, I have to write books, and I have to travel to places. And he just goes straight to Sevastopol, and he's like, there's cannonballs here. But that's really interesting. That's cool to hear. I actually never knew that Mark Twain ever went to Sevastopol. But that would make a lot of sense, because not only was it the Ottomans that pulled up on Sevastopol in the 1850s, it was also the French and the British as well. They were actually the major ones that ended up fighting near Sevastopol and in Crimea. It was actually the Ottomans who were fighting in modern-day Romania against the Russian forces there, the Russian imperial forces that were in that area. But also another cool, interesting rabbit hole for y'all real quick, because I love history, as y'all know, and it's something very interesting to me. Did y'all know that the Ottomans actually controlled Crimea for about as long as the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union did combined?
I definitely didn't know that. I don't know history.
I didn't really know that much until I started getting into Ottoman and Turkish history a bit. And then I learned that they actually controlled Crimea for several hundred years. I think it was somewhere around the length of 250 years. So it was about as long as the United States has existed. That was about the same span of time that Crimea was a part of the Ottoman Empire. And that's why you'll find, and I think I might be able to show this to y'all, it's somewhere around here, there's an Ottoman fortress somewhere along the coastline. I forgot where it was. But if I could find it, that would be really cool, because I could show it to y'all, and y'all be like, oh wow, that's an Ottoman fortress. They were here, like in full scale. Where the hell is this? It was here somewhere. Hang on. Is this it? This is it. That's actually an Ottoman fortress right there.
Oh, that's pretty neat.
And let's see here. Doesn't really... Let's see, here we go. The Arabat Fortress, built in the 17th century by the Ottoman army. This was built in the 1600s. That's how long they were there. And then they lost the area of Crimea and a good bit of Ukraine as well, which they also controlled. Around the later part of the 1760s or so, the Russians ended up taking it from them, and that is the first time in history that the Russian Empire would ever control Crimea. So really, Turkey has, you know, if we want to go off of a Russian mindset here, Turkey has about as much of a claim to Sevastopol and Crimea as the Russians do. And obviously, both of them don't have a claim to Crimea. It's Ukrainian land, but still a very interesting little side note in history there. But
We know when Ukraine finally takes back Crimea and they get their territory back, the biggest advantage to doing that will be Ukraine can finally tell Russia, Crimea River.
Dude, that's what the Russians are already doing, man, because that little drainage canal got cut off to them, and they're like, Crimea River!
Go please have the river back. Please, Crimea River.
The freaking place is in drought. People are thirsty. What the hell is going on? But anyways, still, I gotta say this. It's a very interesting thing in Crimea's history, because Crimea changed hands about as many times as the state of Alabama changed hands in its history. So I would say, take a look into Crimean history. It's really bizarre, really interesting, really cool. Hell, even the Greeks were here. That's where Odessa comes from, funnily enough. And a lot of y'all may know that, because Odessa is mentioned a couple of times in old Greek writings and stories. And that's because the first time Odessa ever existed was because of the Greeks. The Greeks founded Odessa way back in the day.
Oh, that's very good. Did they bring the food with them, though?
Sadly, no. There's no gyros.
Damn.
There's no gyros, only shashlik. And, and that's about it. But anyways, moving on from that, thank you so much once again for the support, Hal Rose, and sharing that really interesting story that I didn't know about. And hopefully I've been able to share some interesting stories, Hal, that you may have not known about or the audience didn't know about. And we're all learning a whole bunch of crap about Crimea right now. And it's not crap, it's high-quality stuff. And so will that. Thank you so much once again for the support, Hal Rose, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because folks like you have made it possible for this channel to run day in and day out for so long, and will help us to continue to make sure that this thing keeps on rolling. And so with that, let's get a live chat.
All right, and the live chat question goes to John Moy, who says, why does NATO and the U.S., with the one chance they have to destroy Russia's army by giving weapons that would win it, and I think his question got cut off, but I assume the question would be, why aren't we giving them more to go ahead and destroy the Russian army?
Well, that's a good question. We try and give them as much as we can. The issue is, however, is that there's also national strategic concerns that everyone's trying to focus on individually for their own nations, and also there's only so much equipment that the Ukrainians can take on efficiently. Like, for example, if we gave them 60 F-16s, wonderful. But who's going to fly them? They don't have any pilots to fly them right now, so we could give them everything and then some that they would want. But the problem is they probably wouldn't be able to use most of the stuff, and it might just sit around building up cobwebs. There wouldn't be people to maintain them, so then they would break down, and then they become useless, because a lot of military equipment requires constant maintenance and pretty continuous operation for it to be effective. So going off of that, that may be the reason why we're not giving them everything under the sun. And also, a lot of countries are also having problems of their own. And I don't like to say this much, because I know people don't like heat being thrown around, but unlike the United States and Poland, which are countries that are always, well, Poland is in the process of rapidly militarizing, and the United States is at a constant state of militarization, many of the countries that have been supporting Ukraine, like Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, have been dealing with dwindling defense spending over the past few decades since the collapse of the Soviet Union and kind of the Western question, which is, what do we do now? And in the response of what do we do now, a lot of them have been slashing their military spending down to very small amounts. And their militaries are reflective of that as well in size and the amount of equipment they have. And so a lot of countries just don't have much to give in reality. And if they wanted to give a lot of stuff, they would start to jeopardize their own national standing, which is already in sometimes rough places. For example, some of you all know this, and I know a lot of British viewers will know this. The British Army is the smallest it's been in history since the early 1700s. That's how small it's gotten. It only has 70,000 active members of the British Army right now. That is the smallest it's ever been. And that's largely because of budget cuts that the British have been putting onto the armed forces of the United Kingdom that are cutting it down smaller and smaller. Now, what's my opinion on it? And of course I can't speak for the Britons. You know, the Britons are a democratic country. They speak for themselves and do what they want, and that's their right. But I think a lot of Western countries need to get into the mindset that military spending is a crucial thing that everyone needs to focus on in the modern world, because we're entering a new age with new rivals. The Soviet Union may be gone, but new ones are stepping up to take their place. The Russians are trying to rear their heads in the east. The Chinese, way over in the far east, are of course trying to build their power and expand across the globe to have a sphere of influence to rival the Western world or even usurp it. So there has to be a response by the West, and they also need to be building up their armed forces and military abilities. Otherwise, we may be outpaced by other countries in the world, like China specifically. And so with that, I hope that
interestingly enough, I was saying a while ago that China looked like it was on pace to outdo the United States when it comes to economy and things like that, and also building up in their military. But it's starting to look like with the sudden collapse of like Evergrande and things like that, it's starting to catch up to the Chinese economy. And a lot of analysts are predicting they're going to have a pretty sharp downturn in just the next year. So they're currently, I believe, not on pace to outtrack the U.S. when it comes to those metrics.
And they aren't. On. Wait, hang on. Say that again.
I said they're not on they're not on track to outpace the United States on those metrics, meaning their economy and the growth of their military at this point.
The Chinese, you're saying?
Right.
Okay, yeah, that's correct. I had to make sure because I was like, wait a minute, did I mishear that? Yes, you are correct. The Chinese economy is expected to slow down rapidly over the next decade or so, and they probably will never end up beating the United States in terms of economic size, military spending, and so on. But it's still a major concern. The Soviet Union never really beat us either in any of those metrics, but they were still our rival and a major concern, and that's something we always need to be on top of. And of course, the rest of the Western world needs to be as well. And I see a lot of people saying that Britain is an island. It only needs a navy and an army. Well, I'm sorry, not an army, a navy and an air force, and it'll be fine. But I have to counter that. Britain might be an island, sure, but Britain is also a part of this Western world. And it's not entirely about their defense alone. It's about the defense of our entire Western alliance. And so for that reason, they need to have a large and strong military like every country in the Western world, because it is very important that everyone is able to do their part. Britain is, of course, the bastion of the European world. If everything failed, you can always count on the Britons hanging out. They hung through the Napoleonic Wars without getting blasted. They hung through World War II without getting blasted by the Germans. They are pretty much the fortress of Britain. And while they don't need an army to be able to defend that fortress, the island fortress, they do need a land army that they can send into mainland Europe to fight there. That's something that they kept up during the Cold War, even when the British Empire largely didn't exist the way it was from the 1950s onwards. They still kept up a very sizable military that could go toe-to-toe with the Soviet Union. So I think that we certainly need to see that again. Hopefully Britons in the parliament will see that, as well as the Germans and the French, and we'll see rapid remilitarization here over the next 10 years or so that way they are ready to go up against any of the threats the Western world will face in the modern day. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion, and thank you once again for sponsoring that live chat, Hal Rose. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, real quick, I hate to divert one more time, but I'm just going to answer this question real quick. What I think, Mike T said, why is China and other countries dumping their U.S. bond holdings? And I haven't necessarily heard of that, but I would assume that since China's starting to experience some very bad economic problems, mainly because of the collapse of Evergrande, which is their like real estate and investment arm of the Chinese government, even though it's portrayed as a private company, it's really not. I would say they're probably trying to free up some money for liquidity to simply float their economy by dumping those U.S. bonds. That would be my guess. But I'm not really sure. I've been trying to catch up on the China situation. It's very interesting with their economy. especially since it looks like they're about to go into a very dark time in their economy out of the blue. Who didn't see that coming? But, hopefully that addresses it. And that's what I think about it, but I could be wrong. But anyways, moving on to our next super chat, we have a massive $200 donation from Frank the Tank. This is his first time super chat, and thank you very much, Frank the Tank, for that extremely generous support. And I did not see a comment attached to it, sadly, because I'd love to address the comment for $200. But good Lord, thank you very much, Frank, for that support and helping to keep us running. And I assume you've probably been lurking around for a while because that is very generous. And thank you very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And Frank the Tank, a freaking legend, didn't even throw in a comment, but that is massive support. And the first time you supported this channel. And I gotta thank you for the amazing and incredible support. That helps us to keep the channel running, helps us to keep the lights on, and not only that, it's just incredibly generous and kind of you to support us so massively. And I've got to thank you so much once again for the support. It's unbelievable. Honestly, whenever people support us that greatly, to me, it goes beyond just basic support for us to be able to do this as a job. It really goes into y'all just enjoy the channel so much, y'all find it worthwhile to support us a great deal. And I gotta thank you so much for that, because I'm completely blown away. I never really know why folks find us to deserve that much support, but we are highly honored and incredibly appreciative nevertheless, because folks like you are making it possible for us to be able to eat well and sleep well. And so with that, thank you so much once again, Frank the Tank. Did not throw in a comment, but we are incredibly appreciative nonetheless. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope I addressed that fairly well. And if you have any comment you would like us to address, Matthew, make sure to put that in the queue and have that as the first thing to address when we get to live chats. But with that...
yes, boss.
Oh, yes, boss, yes. But with that, we are on to the final question of this segment, and then we're going to be getting right back into the news.
All right, and this last one goes to Mark Gagne, who puts in a $50 donation himself, and thank you very much as well, Mark, for that very generous support. And he says, "Oh, the shame has a silver lining in that the Canadian Nazi might be extradited to Poland to face justice, and the Russians will face justice even if it takes 80 years for their crimes against humanity and of genocide of the beautiful people of Ukraine."
And thank you so much for the support, Mark Gagne. And it looks like our little Nazi Waffen-SS Brigade boy might be finally facing the drums of justice, apparently, now that he's gotten enough public attention. It only took him getting a standing ovation in the Canadian Parliament for that to happen. But I'll have to be honest with y'all. I think that while the guy might be 93 years old, I believe, I still have to say, if you were a part of the Waffen-SS, the atrocities that you committed aren't something that disappears with how old you've become. The guy probably did commit some damn near horrid war crimes in the middle of the Second World War, being a part of the SS. That just kind of came with the territory. So if he's going to Poland to face justice, that's good on the Canadian government for trying to right the wrong by making sure that the guy is finally found guilty for his crimes. But still, that is insane to think that he was even up there. Of course, I have to say this, though, Mark, because I know you're also a Canadian. I do not think a single Canadian should feel guilty for what happened there. That was something that entirely happened through the Ukrainian government's and y'all's elected representatives' decision, not y'all's. And so I don't think the nation of Canada should be disgraced. I think the particular politicians that made the decision to have that guy there should be disgraced, if anyone. And beyond that, everyone ought to just brush that one under the rug and move on, because that was a terrible mistake that was made from the Canadian government and the politicians there. But that does not reflect on the nation of Canada or most people inside the Parliament itself, because most of them are also completely ignorant to the situation that unfolded. But still, thank you so much for the support, Mark, and giving us a little bit of a follow-up on that story there. And, of course, thank you as well for being a longtime member of the Lee Spring Army and supporting this channel, so that way we can continue to make this news possible. And so with that, we're now going to be moving on from the question segment and back into the news, starting off with the northeastern area, where we saw no frontline movement, and moving to our first clip just south of Svatove, we got to see the 102nd getting a good hit on a BMP. And so here it is. And we're going to be muting that. And we can see the drone coming in on the BMP and hitting it right at the rear of the turret. We can also see a drone, it appears to be lurking in a field. It takes off, starts going on its way, and it's looking for a target. Man, it's cruising for a bruising, you know what I mean?
Man, it's the bruisers.
Man, call this thing a a drunken salesman in the 1950s because he's going to be giving out bruisings today. But we can see a little APC moving down the road there. I wonder what that is, Prithee. Perhaps Russian? Maybe. An exquisite Russian 73 from the Kazan Oblast? Perhaps. Quite rare.
Notice they call this an F-16. The drone.
Yeah, dude. They have high hopes. But when you see the drone,
they're trying to manifest this thing into existence.
Man, the Ukrainian sitting there with a stick that he found near the trench going, Alakazam. And then he's like holding over the drone, hoping it transforms into an F-16. He went, aw, it didn't.
He's probably making sound effects while he's flying it.
Over G, pull up. But anyways, we can see the drone coming in slow motion. This also appears to be a BMP-2 or a BRM. No, it's a BMP-2. And we can see the drone video stop right there. And that's, well, there we go. Went right into the back of the turret. And we can see the charred remains of the BMP down there on the road. Very telling of its fate. That's the end of the clip, but beautiful to see. And Noob of the Year, you're asking a question that makes me think you're a Noob of the Year. You think I missed that clip of the Terminator getting taken out? Because that's actually what we're going into right here. The Ukrainian Special Forces did take out a Terminator today. It was confirmed on film, and from what I understand, this was the first BMPT Terminator to be confirmed destroyed. Here's the clip. When you see it right down there firing at Ukrainian forces, and we can see the drone coming on in, there's the Terminator in the middle of the street. And boom, chugga, bliat. And we can see now from the air, it hitting the Terminator. And we can see its fire get a little bit odd looking. The smoke billowing over the BMPT. And from what we understand, it burned out from an engine fire. And so now we can see a little Ukrainian, well, not a Ukrainian, a Russian mortar crew. And we can see a Ukrainian drone coming in on them. Oh, hey, look. Oh, hello there. Oh, hello. How do you do? And there goes that mortar pit. And Robin, I love the play on the Terminator's catchphrase, I'll be back. He said, I won't be back. I gotta say, man, you stole that from me. I'm just kidding. But anyways, you can see the next Russian vehicle get hit. It appears to have swerved off the road, and they had a run-in with a tree, but then it kept going, and then it caught on fire around the corner. And now you see a little Lada cruising by.
A whole lot of junk.
Dude, those Russians in the Lada, man, watch this guy swerve into a tree and then explode and catch on fire. And meanwhile, in their Lada, they're hearing, unke ili, unke bake, unke ili, unke bake. You know, they're like listening to some music or something, just driving by going, oh, boy. But with
hey,
that,
Ivan, why do you think we have a whole lot of trouble? Probably because we're a whole lot of stupid. You're a whole lot of right.
Man, call this shit head because he's smoky. But anyways, moving on from that.
Okay.
We're going to be moving on from that clip. And there you go, Noob of the Year. We did see it, the BMPT Terminator being taken out by the Ukrainian Special Forces. And behind the lines near Vavarivka, we also got to see the Ukrainians hitting a D-30 howitzer. Check it out. There's the D-30. Here comes the artillery. And it took out the D-30 immediately. I hope y'all like the sound effects. And man, call this gonorrhea because it burns. But anyways, moving on from
Whoa.
moving on from
that's out of pocket on that one.
Man, it might have been out of pocket, but you got to admit it's juicy. But anyways,
that's wild.
Anyways, moving on, way behind the lines, behind Luhansk even, and almost at the Russian border near the city of Donetsk in Russia, just to make things very confusing. We got to see that a massive ammo depot in the area was destroyed by Ukrainian fire in the area of Krasnodon. Here's the clip. Wow. When you hear the alarms going off for the SCP containment breach, and I'd have to say that's probably dozens of tons, if not hundreds of tons of ammunition that went up over there, because it's a pretty damn big explosion. It looks like it was the Oppenheimer release. But anyways, moving on from that little clip, and I'm going to have to figure out a new joke for massive explosions outside of Oppenheimer. I think we've used that ever since the movie was put out. But moving on from the Luhansk area...
The Boppenheimer.
But anyways, moving on from that towards Bila Orivka, we also got to see a Russian Strela 10 being destroyed. And in the caption, they called it a Streel, but it's a Strela. There's no such thing as a Streel. And of course, this was done by the
Hey,
Atom.
Cletus, break out the Streel. We gotta get firing. You mean your Strela, bliat?
Mine, they gave me a 20% discount at the Piggly Wiggly. Ain't that a Streel? I mean, you see this little drone here is
a Streel of a deal. 2-for-1 Russian.
Dude,
on sale today. Today only. Come on and get it quick.
Wait, hang on, man. I got a better joke here. Watch this drone. You're listening to Courage 314 low battery. That's what the
Damn, son, where'd you find this battery?
Real trap shit. Walk with your boys. We make it look easy.
Explosive-holics. That was cringe.
A little bit, but we're gonna act like it's the funniest thing ever. But we're gonna see the drone run right into the Strela right there. Wait, did that run into the windshield of... Oh, it did. Hey, there's the gunner right there. Say hey to the gunner, everyone. He's about to get a close-up. And there it is. There's the close-up. And man, that thing went up like a Roman candle immediately. Those little missiles are very volatile because of the propellant they have inside of them. Man, and I gotta say... Man, that thing's leaving a missile streel across the sky. Oh, man. And we see it burning on out in the field. The missile smoke just covering the whole scene. And we're not seeing anyone getting out of that streel. And it's a Strela, I know, but we're going to call it a streel now because the caption called it a streel. But man, how toasty can you get? And it's continuing to toast and roast.
Roasted.
Streel roasting on an open fire.
What's up? Wait a minute. What's up with that house right there? Did you see that? Like, go back into the zoom. Look at that house.
Man,
like, what is that?
Help! Someone's unhoused in Lego City. Hey! You can build a new house. Like, what is that house?
It's uniquely modern looking. It's kind of odd.
Dude, it looks like Frank Lloyd Wright designed the thing. Like, it's like, where did it come from? But we can see the streel continuing to burn in the field. And I gotta say, man, when that streel got hit, the Russians squealed.
Damn.
That's deep. I'm Ernest Hemingway.
He's dead, Joe.
I'm Ernest Hemingway, and this is Jackass. But anyways, moving on from that clip. And moving on towards the northern flank of Bakhmut, we also got to see the Atom unit hitting Russian forces here as well. Oh, we're going to be muting that. Man, and Frank the Tank just threw in another super chat with a deep question. Like a very deep question. But we can see the Russian forces getting hit by the Atom unit. And look at that. The ammo is cooking. Man, call it a bonfire the way they be cooking. We see the smoke continuing to billow out of the outpost. And man, call that Russian outpost tender the way it got ghosted. Love to hear it, love to see it. Oh man, I'm telling you. But we can see here the fire continuing to rage on the outpost, continuing to burn it on down. Quite nicely. Oh, a little small explosion here and there. And D.L. Hemingway, man, he said, hey, enough with the Hemingway jokes. I swear, oh man, I get no respect around here. It's not about you, it's about Ernest Hemingway, not D.L. Hemingway. You're the respectable one. But anyways, I'm just kidding. I know some people are about like, are you saying that Ernest Hemingway isn't respectable? And, no, I'm not saying that. I'm just making a joke. But anyways, very nice to see the Atom.
Damn, man. You get in an argument yourself. What in the hell?
Man, I got to preempt him, man. I got to get the point out and then the counter argument. But anyways, moving on from that, great to see the Atom unit hitting more Russian forces. And we also got to see the 77th Air Mobile Brigade hitting some Russian forces in this area as well. And you can see that right here. All right.
Oh, copyrighted.
Oh, man, they said, I got a barracuda. That's it. And that resonated with me. But we can see a drone
This is
flying.
the wild division, too, you know.
Man, they be going, squall! The Russians be doing that, too, when they look up into the sky. Like, soing Scoob, they're hitting us from the sky. Run, Raggy, bombing run. And we see the Russians scooting around a little bit of luggage. And we now see the Ukrainians going for him again. Because it was funny the first time, it's going to be even funnier the second time. To the Ukrainians, that is. Not to me. I don't laugh at this stuff. I'm above that. But we can see the drone exploding over the Russians. And a third one. Third time's the charm, after all. But alas, let's get a fourth one up in the mix. That will fix things. Oh. Ati. And there it goes. And that's the end of the clip. But pretty accurate stuff from the 77th Air Mobile Brigade. And would y'all believe it? Would y'all believe it? Do y'all know who we just saw in the live chat? It's the OG Ellison Bosun himself, Walter A. Lakota. He's joined us tonight. Hey! Welcome, Walter. Welcome. We'd love to see the channel legends in here. And of course, many channel legends are here tonight, like Rob Eisman. But nevertheless, come on in. And we're getting the whole LSA Navy up in here, or the LSN up in here. But moving on from the northern flank of Bakhmut, and on into the southern flank of Bakhmut, near Klishkivka. And by the way, we're not showing the front lines today because there was almost no movement anywhere. It was largely a stagnant front line. But moving on towards Klishkivka, we got to see a Ukrainian soldier firing an RPG at the Russians in the distance. We're going to mute that. And we can see he's got the old fire extinguisher attachment. See him lining up his RPG, firing it, and it explodes.
It's like it fired a propane tank or with propane accessories.
God dang it, Bobby. That boy ain't right. And now you can see him running up with, I don't even know what this is, a bazooka? It looks like might be a Carl Gustav. No, I don't know what this is, but he's lining it up to shoot. He's firing it. And he hits the Russians point blank range about 50 yards away. That's not point blank. Y'all get the picture, though. And that's the end of the clip, but really cool to see. Huge respect. And so with that, we're going to be moving on from that little clip and on into our next one, where we also saw a soldier from the 3rd Brigade helping to evacuate the wounded. Now, really quickly, before I show you all this, I have to keep this clear that this is not in violation of YouTube's community guidelines. There's nothing about this clip that is graphic, and so have to say that. We are also showing it in a news reporting and documentary purpose, which falls under Title 17, and is also one of the exceptions to the normal rule on this sort of stuff. It is news. And so I'm going to
you want to show this?
Yeah, because
YouTube doesn't ever really respond to reason like that.
Well, you know, you're pretty right on that, I got to be honest, but we are going to show it. You know what? We're going to show it. We can see the soldier running down the tree line here. You see him running past a position that's now held by more soldiers of the 3rd Brigade. And we see the stretcher bearers here gathered around a carrying harness with a wounded soldier in it. You see him now picking up the carrying harness, and they're now going to start walking him down the long street to get him on out of the area. We now see them taking a moment. We can see the soldier down there in the harness again. They're going to pick him up and carry him a little bit further. It's important to watch videos like these because while the 3rd Brigade makes battles look easy, you also have to remember that at the exact same time, battles are also quite dangerous, and we have to see the brave valor and heroism that Ukrainian soldiers undergo to save each other on the battlefield like we're seeing right now. You can see them continuing to move on down the street, and of course it's physically exhausting. We now see them passing a knocked out T-72B3 of the Russian army, marked all over with V's and Z's. And this, of course, shows that they have made ground, considering that that tank was knocked out. You hear artillery exploding in the distance, which makes them pause for a moment to hear how far away it was. And they continue to carry the man further on down the street. And of course, this also gives you all a great appreciation of how difficult the job of a stretcher bearer is. It takes 4 guys a monumental amount of effort, physically, to be able to get this guy off the field. And this is why the Ukrainians are constantly looking for mechanized ways to move the wounded off the battlefield, make it a lot easier for the stretcher bearers to do their job. We now see them moving the harness down into this outpost here, where they apparently have a medic that's going to be checking on his condition. But that's the end of the clip, showing some of the amazing efforts of the 3rd Brigade to make sure to save their own, and of course a huge shout out to those soldiers who were in the 1st Battalion of the 3rd Brigade, which that video came from. Moving on from that, we also got to see some pretty cool videos from the 4th Brigade of the Ukrainian National Guard. Starting off with our first pictures, we got to see one of their T-72M main battle tanks that is out there on the field, which is pretty nice to see. And moving on into our second clip, we also got to see them thanking a group called Ukraine Aid Ops for providing them with hearing protection so that way they can operate the artillery without getting tinnitus, which is pretty nice.
Щиру подяку команді волонтерів United Air Operation, Ukraine Aid Operation за надані тактичні навушники. Разом до перемоги. Слава Україні! Героям слава! Гармата!
And then that sound at the end gives you a good idea why they need hearing protection, because that's loud. Dude, every bird in the area just went tweep, tweep, tweep. You know, and start screaming because they can't hear itself. But anyways, that's the end of the clip. Great to see them getting some hearing protection in the 4th Brigade. And moving on out of the area of Bakhmut and towards Avdiivka, we also got to see some interesting clips of a small convoy on the road heading into Avdiivka. Oh, and we're going to mute that. And we see their little convoy here of MTLBs and a couple of older supply trucks. And also quite a modern Toyota. Is that a Toyota? Did I get that?
Could be a Mitsubishi.
A Nissan? Mitsubishi. Mitsubishi material. But we can see him here not showing us the steering wheel where I can confirm the freaking brand. But anyways, still nice to see their little convoy, and hopefully they will be safe on their move into Avdiivka. But moving on to our next clip, we also got to see a Mr. B firing. You all watch this video. Oh, sorry, Mr. S.
Now you're about to make the Mr. B joke.
Yeah, I was about to make that joke, but then it's a Mr. S. This is also a Ukrainian Mr. S, and these are actually exceptionally rare. I think there's only about 20 of them in service with the Ukrainian army, and this is one of them. And we can see that the backblast got him there. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Nice to see them operating one of their Mr. S's. And I gotta say, man, they missed them good, hopefully. But moving on from the area of Donetsk and down into the southern front, we got very few clips from the southern front today. The Robotyne front was actually quite quiet, with only one video clip coming out. But in the area of the village chain, we did see the Ukrainians firing an M777 artillery piece. We hear some copyrighted music. We always love to hear it, but we can see them adjusting their M777 here and getting it ready to go. And now we can see them firing the piece right there, and hopefully the round goes down range and hits the target. But with that, that's the end of the clip. Wonderful to see the M777 in operation, and moving on from that, we're now going to be moving on into our next clip near Krasna Poliana, where we saw the Ukrainians conducting a remote detonation of an electronics warfare tower. This was actually quite cool. You've never seen a drone operate like this before. And so we can see the drone coming down to the tower, where we can see the EW system. And we see them trying to place the explosive. We can see them do that right there, release the harness, fly away, and then they blow up the camera. And any second now, they detonate the charges, and there goes the camera.
Oh, wow.
It's gone in a flash.
That's pretty
It's like
cool.
magic. Really neat.
Just leave it behind and get the drone out of there and everything. That's pretty convenient.
Man, I gotta say, massive respect. Really smart, too. Really smart move. But moving on from that little clip, which was just bizarre to see, never seen anything like it, we're now gonna be moving on to the area of Huilapol, where we got to see a RM-70 Vampire MLRS firing off its unguided rockets. And we can see that right here. We're gonna be muting that, but we can see it's firing off its rockets. The volley ends, and then it just chills. But very nice to see. And wonderful to know that those Czech-provided MLRSs are still doing some good work on the front lines. Moving on into the area of Robotyne, it was exceptionally quiet today, but we did get a look at a very rare Ukrainian trench digging and emplacement digging system. I've never seen this thing before, so it was quite new to me. That's it. And there it is.
Very Soviet. Oh, that is pretty unique. It's like a mini dredger or something.
Yeah, it's really, really weird, but really cool.
Man, I bet that thing uses a ton of fuel.
Oh, you know it. And you know that thing's got to be torqued up. And that, folks, is how they dig the emplacements that quickly. It's with that thing right there. But I gotta say, it's quite a boring machine. But anyways, moving on from that clip, and moving on out of the well, actually, moving on over towards Piatki-Kotki, they actually were able to capture a T-72B3 in this area today. So check that out, because it's a pretty nice little addition to the Ukrainian army.
Недооцінювати противника, що може бути гірше на полі бою, аніж недооцінка ворога. Я знаходжусь на місці механіка-водія в трофейному танку. Це дуже жирний трофей, який взяла 15-та бригада Нацгвардії Карадах. Російський танк Т-72Б3 модифікації 22-го року. Його ще називають економ-версією Т-90. От, ну, що тут на перший погляд нового? Ліворуч від мене дисплейний комплекс. Це, по суті, такий бортовий комп'ютер, який контролює роботу всіх систем та механізмів.
He's like, shh, my sweet little one. You will be in service with the Ukrainian army.
The oil temperature is just right, блядь. Oh, yes.
Dude, he sits there when it fires and blasts away a Russian position, he taps the computer monitor and goes, good tank. Yeah, very good tank.
And the computer says, do I look like a real boy now, Papa?
Do I look like a real boy, Papa?
Це чи погано? Ну, питання. Тому що, коли нацгвардійці захопили цей танк, взяли його, затрофеїли його, вони спробували його примусово завести, і комп'ютер відмовився це зробити, написавши на цьому дисплеї, що, мовляв, треба долити охолоджувальної рідини. Але, знову ж таки, недооцінювати противника не варто.
You can tell that this man is quite passionate about the capture tank.
Санкції, вона в змозі модернізувати до сучасного рівню сотні таких танків, всередині одного з яких я зараз знаходжусь.
And that's the end of the clip, but as we can see, a new captured T-72B3, and this man is very enthused about this little event that's occurred, and a good reason to be so. But moving on from that area, and moving on down into Kherson, we also got two video clips from here today. One was of a drone hitting a Russian position. I said it was an ammo depot. It's actually some Russian soldiers in a house, but, you know, it's a Russian target. It got hit, knocked out. Check it out. There's the drone. And now we can hear the Pac-Man music playing, and there goes the drone. It's already on low battery. They were expecting a short
Why is
flight.
everything low battery in Ukraine? Like, every drone they have is low on battery.
Dude, you could supercharge a battery in Ukraine to like 200%, and it would still say low battery. But there it is, hitting the house.
Oh,
it
what was that
something
just flying off of it?
I think it just threw a lawn chair. Let's see what that was again. I have no idea what that is, but it went flying. It was launched. And half the house is gone now. And now it's on fire, and we can see Russians running out. Get out of there, please! There they go. But nice to see that little drone right there doing the amazing work that it should be doing. Moving on from that into our next clip, we also got to see some grain silos were hit today by a 500-kilogram glide bomb. Or a 500-kilogram air bomb. But here's the clip. We can see the grain silos. We can see it getting hit by the 500-kilogram bombs that the Russians launched at the grain silos, of course destroying them. Once again, the Russians going out of their way to target something that has nothing to do with the war, but has everything to do with feeding people around the world. Which is pretty bizarre. And so with that, that's the end of the clip right there, but once again showing the Russians' deliberate attacks against Ukrainian civilian infrastructure and trying to beat the Ukrainian public into submission, which will simply never happen. But with that, it's now time for us to move on up to Kyiv and cover the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 581 of the war. And so, without
Get the
further
speech, please.
We've got to get that speech. And so, thank the Lord I call it that, so that way we didn't have to hear that guy. Here's the speech.
Дорогі українці, українки, короткий звіт за цей день. Довгий, насичений, багато нарад, різні зустрічі. Ранковий селектор, доповіді військових, СБУ, МВС, зокрема щодо російських обстрілів та ліквідації їхніх наслідків. Окрема увага Херсону, Херсонщині. Цими днями Росія з особливою жорстокістю обстрілює Херсон, Береслав, села Херсонської області, артилерія, керовані авіабомби по будинках, фермах, по звичайних магазинах та інфраструктурі. Свідомий терор окупанта. Мої співчуття усім, хто втратив рідних та близьких. І я дякую кожному і кожній, хто працює і у цій області, на Херсонщині та в усіх інших наших регіонах, які зазнають подібних ударів. Харківщина, Донеччина, Запоріжжя, Північні області. Надзвичайно важливо, щоб, попри все, були і рятівники, і порятунок. Коли вони є, коли життя рятується, терор не переможе. Я дякую усім лікарям та працівникам ДСНС, усім волонтерам, поліцейським, усім комунальникам, енергетикам, місцевій владі та кожному, хто допомагає. Я дякую за збереження життів наших людей та за відновлення життєвих умов. Окреме доручення військовим, будуть окремі доручення і усім, хто займається міжнародним напрямком. Нашим воїнам потрібно більше інструментів, щоб знищувати і російські ракети, і шахеди, та інші ударні дрони, і російську авіацію. І я вдячний усім у світі, хто вже допомагає і готовий збільшити допомогу нашій державі саме такими засобами, які здатні забезпечити більше захисту від російського терору. Прийняв сьогодні вірчі грамоти послів, 7 послів, які починають працювати в Україні, Велика Британія, Франція, Естонія, Канада, Угорщина, Словенія та Європейський Союз. Поспілкувався з усіма, вони налаштовані на максимально продуктивну роботу з Україною і впевнений, саме така робота потрібна зараз усім нам, усім у світі, хто прагне наблизити завершення війни, наблизити нашу спільну перемогу. Маємо відтепер і нового амбасадора нашої фандрейзингової платформи United 24. Ним став британський актор Марк Стронг. Ми говорили сьогодні, я подякував за рішення Марка працювати за напрямком освіта і наука. Його метою буде збори коштів на відбудову українських шкіл. Наше завдання – дати усім українським дітям можливість навчати в школі, а не дистанційно, там і тоді, де і коли це дозволяють, а вже ж безпекові умови. До речі, завдяки United 24 вже зібрано понад 470 мільйонів доларів, майже півмільярда благодійних внесків з більш ніж 110 країн світу. Різні країни, різний рівень внесків. Це і люди допомагають, звичайні люди, і компанії. Я дякую всім. І ще одне. Провів сьогодні кілька підготовчих нарад. Ще в цьому місяці ми плануємо потужні заходи для посилення держави І вже працюємо над змістовним наповненням жовтня та листопада. Україна буде сильніше. Україна матиме більше можливостей для свого захисту. Що б не відбувалося у світі, якими б не були умови зовнішні, ми з вами маємо пам'ятати. Лише наші умови, лише наше внутрішнє ставлення до України, до свободи, до наших цілей визначає те, коли ми досягнемо нашої мети. Головної мети – перемоги України. Сила для України немає альтернатив, і кожен, хто посилює державу, кожна, хто стає міцніше, та усі, хто допомагає боротись проти ворога і здобувати для України результати, всі наближають нашу мету. Слава нашим воїнам, слава нашому незламному народу. Слава Україні!
And Herom Slava. And Herom Slava. And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 581 of the war. And that is the end of the halftime show as well. We are now about to be moving on into that next part of the stream that lots of y'all love. This is the part when we get to talk to all of y'all. And of course, before we do, can I just say, hit that like button. Hit that like button as hard as the person you dislike the most. And if you don't dislike someone, I mean, you know, just hell, I don't know, come up with someone. Putin, hell, like hit it harder than you'd hit Putin. But slam that like button nevertheless, because it of course helps to promote the channel, get us out there to more folks. And by the way, I was just thinking this might be a cool idea. I was thinking, y'all, it hit me the other day. What if we started a campaign to let everyone know what the Enforcer channel and the Leaf Spring Army is about? On places like Twitter, on places like YouTube. Why not? Spread the word far and wide. Let everyone know what we do here, who y'all are, and what we've all achieved. The $1.2 million that's been raised for nonprofits, among all other things. But still, make sure to spread the word far and wide and let people know what the LSA is. But still, with that, let's move on into that halftime show. What do we got, Matthew?
All right, and let's see what the LSA said about the top questions of the night on the polls. And the first one says, if the U.S. suddenly ceased or drastically reduced support to Ukraine, would this severely harm their country? 80% said yes, Ukraine is reliant on U.S. resupply. 10% said, they have other allies. 7% said unsure, and 3% said no, Ukraine has built up a stockpile. And I will say that while Europe has provided a significant amount of aid to Ukraine as well, the U.S. is single-handedly providing the most. There's no question about that. And by losing the U.S., if they were to lose the U.S., that would prove to be a very major problem for their country. Either Europe would have to step up and fill the gap, which I don't think they're capable of doing, to be quite honest, because the United States simply has a ton of resources, and Europe as a whole doesn't seem to be able to match that, or either they're unwilling to do so, and they're not even willing to spend on their own defense in the NATO alliance, so that tells you a lot. So I would say that Ukraine is really reliant on the U.S. for their resupplies, and hopefully we can have folks clear up the Ukraine aid situation and get that stuff basically guaranteed to go to Ukraine, so that way we don't have a problem, and also there aren't other problems as well. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I've got to say that in my honest opinion, if the United States cut out support to Ukraine massively, I think that it probably most likely would end up being a bad thing. The United States has provided the most realized military support to Ukraine. The Germans actually are not that far behind us, believe it or not, but that's in pledge support, not in actual physical support that has made it there. And so going off of that, I would say that that would be a massive detriment, and it's very important and crucial that the United States continues to provide large amounts of support to Ukraine and help them in their aims of pushing the Russians back and beating them. That's something I'm pretty confident the United States will do regardless of what the next few years may bring, and I'm sure that many of y'all will probably see that that is the case if anything was to happen in any regard here in America, because a lot of people bring that up, and I know that, you know, there are words being spoken out there that would seem to indicate that. But y'all wait and see. Y'all will see that even if people get elected on a platform like that, the support will probably not end. The government is largely a one-track kind of thing on most topics and subjects, and supporting Ukraine is just an inherent strategic interest of the United States. That is not an opinion. That is a fact. And you will see that if you look through the history of U.S. support to Ukraine, it's been going on ever since 2014. And you all know what's happened in between 2014 and who was in charge then, who was in charge in the years after that, and who's in charge now. The support was largely consistent across the board, believe it or not. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
And our second poll says the U.S. Army soldier that ran into North Korea in July has now been returned to the USA. And what are your thoughts? 41% said, great, now we punish him. 39% said that wasn't worth the trouble. 14% said, good, but not a big deal. 6% said unsure. And I gotta say, that's pretty bad when North Korea doesn't even want you, and they're willing to give you up that easy. I did see in several news articles that apparently the United States and North Korea's government had some very high-level talks, and obviously North Korea isn't going to let him out for free. We did give them something, and we don't know exactly what was given. I personally don't think that was worth the trouble because he was a low-level private. He was already in line for a disciplinary action, allegedly, that we heard from the news reports. And we probably gave up something, I would guess, that we shouldn't have given up to get back basically a very low-level soldier who had some very bad issues going on with his command. So, you know, very, very strange situation all the way around. And I'm going to stop there. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'm going to say they can keep him. I don't think we want him back. I mean, he's a private. What in the world does he know?
We already got him back.
I know, but we shouldn't have let him. We should have gotten him back. We should just let him stay there. I mean, I consider every American citizen to be important, except for the ones that commit treason. And that guy committed treason. There's no other way to explain it. He's a U.S. serviceman running across the DMZ to a rival nation, or nation that we are at hostile terms with, and then gave himself up to him. I don't care what in the world this guy is. I don't care if he's an American citizen or not. That was treason. And I don't think we even should have tried to get the guy back. I think we should have just said, you know what, y'all can keep him and figure out what to do with him. Whether that's putting him in prison, putting him at hard labor, or, you know, making an example of him to the public in North Korea. It's like, that's no longer the United States' concern. We got many other pressing things to attend to, rather than some stupid guy who ran across the border on his own volition. And also, Hokey Redneck said he wandered over the line. No, that man sprinted over the line. He ran across that bridge.
Right into a North Korean van.
Yeah, right into a van. The van was waiting for him. He actually been talking to North Korean officials for a little bit in South Korea, then pretty much arranged this whole thing. It wasn't an incident. It wasn't an accident. This was a whole arranged affair that happened in between the North Koreans and him. And apparently the North Koreans got this guy, and he was either so stupid or so crazy or something. They were like, you know what? I don't even think we want him. Let's give him back. But nevertheless, everyone, he will have a nice warm bed at Fort Leavenworth, where he belongs. Because someone who does something like that is completely stupid beyond belief, and not only that, does not put any concern or care into this nation. And considering that he did that, I think that that deserves a very harsh sentence from the U.S. military, considering that the Uniform Code of Military Justice will probably be the one that presides over his case. Hopefully we'll see that he gets put in Fort Leavenworth for decades for what he did. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. I usually don't get into making comments like that, but what that guy did was downright stupid. I don't think anyone could disagree with that. It's treason. Who knows? Maybe he knew something. You know, maybe he had a classified clearance for some stuff, and he ended up spilling that to the North Koreans. We don't know. He was just a private after all, so it couldn't have been too much, but that's just still annoying to no end. And why the hell did he think that was a smart idea? And how in the world did someone not vet him enough to think, hey, this guy's got like some serious mental issues. Maybe we shouldn't put him near the DMZ. Because usually they vet American soldiers heavily before they're allowed near the DMZ, and then this guy was allowed around and then just ran across the border. So made no sense. But
yeah, really, it's like they let somebody with a pending like a court-martial case or whatever it was, a disciplinary action of some sort, walk right next to the place where he could possibly escape all of his troubles and woes by just running a couple of feet over the border. It's like, that was a terrible decision. Not the first goofy decision I've ever seen the U.S. military do, though.
Yeah, well, you know, everyone makes mistakes, but this one was a little bit of a more serious oversight. But nevertheless, it was on that guy alone that he ran across the border. And that was just a stupid thing. I don't really think there's much more I can add, rather than I think his punishment should be quite severe for what he did. It should set an example to everyone else in the U.S. Armed Forces that you don't do something like that. That's treason. It's not permissible. It's a very serious offense. And also, something that I think is very important to remember is that this guy is probably not the only one. There are other people out there that probably will do very weird or very stupid things. And I know that about a quarter of our channel's audience are veterans of the armed forces, and I'm sure that I can say this with a great deal of confidence, having not personally experienced it myself and having never served in the military. But I bet y'all all knew a guy who was in the military that you actually had to deal with that was a very stupid guy who would do very stupid things and would end up getting in trouble with the military police, would end up getting in trouble all over the place, and was overall a poor soldier or a poor service member. I'm sure y'all all knew a guy like that. And I think that we always have to keep in mind that we have to make sure this is not an isolated incident. There are probably many other people out there that are like that. It needs to be clear that this kind of stuff is not permissible in the military under any circumstances. The punishment must be very severe. And so with that, hope that does address that fairly well. And I see a lot of the veterans already going, yep, I can back that up. There are some people like that. And man, they, like, from what I've heard from the stories I knew of veterans that I got to talk to personally that were in my family or I just, knew in general, every single one of them had stories like that. And you're like, oh man, I feel sorry for them. But nevertheless, that is what happens. But anyways, and also East Malibu said not only in the military. Yeah, it's not only in the military, but for some reason, I've noticed that, like, there's a divide. Like, people act like people aren't people anymore in the military. They act like everyone's going to be perfect, upstanding, and do the right thing in the military. But you have to remember that these people are citizens of the United States. And just like there are wicked and vile citizens, there's also going to be wicked and vile service members every once in a while as well. It's just the normal way of things. There's always going to be bad people in everything. And you've got to get the bad eggs out of there. Or you at least got to put the fear of God in the bad eggs, so that way they don't act like bad eggs to the extreme like that right there. But with that,
got to get them up out of there.
Oh yeah, you do. And also, a lot of veterans are coming in right now, and they're like, yeah, there is there is some pretty rough stuff that goes on in the military, and there is, but it's the way of life. It's like that everywhere. It's like that in the corporate office. But one thing I always find very weird is that whenever that happens in the military, people act like, what? Someone would do that in the military? What do you mean? It's like, well, they're normal people. It's like, just because they went through basic doesn't mean they stop being people. They still have faults. Everyone has faults. And you
remember, we're not obviously not going to name them, so don't get worried. We're not naming or giving out any identification or anything, but we have heard stories of some people getting in shootouts in the military because one person was particularly bad, and the person got in a bad spot, and then all of a sudden someone might have accidentally let a shot off in his direction, and then it turned into a shootout. So there's some crazy people in there mixed in with the good ones.
Yeah, and I've known some people personally from where I went to school. I'm not going to say their names, that ended up doing very stupid things that almost ended up getting them discharged as soon as they entered. One guy, I remember, he was I heard a story about him. He went to the Coast Guard, and then as soon as he got out of basic, he got drunk and wrecked his car. And of course, y'all know that's a very serious deal in the military. I don't know why, but it is an incredibly serious deal when that happens in the military. And he did it as soon as he got out of basic. I don't really know his actual story, and I'm not going to say his name, but I think he may have actually been discharged because of that, almost on the spot. And I think it's always important to remember, just because of a person's occupation or their position, it does not mean that they're no longer a normal person. They are susceptible to all the faults and failings of normal people. And I think that we have to go about that approach the same way for everyone, regardless whether you're in the military, regardless whether you're a normal person, a politician. The rules are the same no matter what, and people are the same across the board. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and moving on to our super chat questions yet again. We have a $50 donation from Spardion 3000, and thank you very much for that support. And he says, LSA, do you believe that there is one specific item that could be a true game changer, i.e. Attackham's M1A1 or Leopard? And to be honest, that is a very broad question, and this is an answer that I would give you. The one item that would definitely be a game changer if it was given to Ukraine would be Minuteman 3 missiles. But Enforcer, what say you?
Damn! No, we don't want to get that.
That would be a game changer, though.
Well, that would be a game changer, but I don't think we want to get there. But still, I would say that, in my opinion, a true game changer would be F-16s, and they're already on the way, and I think those are certainly going to be a massive game changer when they arrive, but they haven't arrived yet, sadly. But when they get there, I promise y'all, they're going to be a big deal. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the massive amount of support, Spartian 3000. That is your first super chat to this channel, and I got to thank you so much for the massive amount of support and helping this channel to keep on running, because folks like you who make the choice to support this channel help us keep this thing running and help us to be able to do this as a job 60 hours a week. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Frank the Tank, who puts in a $50 donation. That is his second super chat of the night, and big thanks to you for that, Frank the Tank. And I think he already left for the night, though, so he'll hear this tomorrow. But Frank says, as an attorney, why do you feel so connected to the channel? And I know the curriculum you have ahead of you, and it allows very little discretionary time. And oh man, I'm telling you, I gotta agree with you. Oh, we're feeling burned. Oh goodness. But for me, I would say I feel so connected with the channel because of the good the channel does. Because every single Sunday, which is my favorite day of the week, we get to raise money for charity that helps Ukraine. And that is single-handedly the one single thing that I'm so very proud about that the channel has accomplished is the fundraising. Because 1.2 million or somewhere in that ballpark, which is what we've raised so far through all the fundraisers, is a tremendous amount of money. And sometimes I really have to sit down and think about how much money that really is. That is insane to think that this YouTube channel by itself has raised 1.2 million for charity. That it's really hard to wrap my mind around, but crazy. The LSA has all come together to make that happen. So that's why I feel so connected to it. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that the reason why I feel connected to this channel is because I've been doing this for so long. It feels more important to me, honestly, than law school at this point. Even going to law school right now, it still seems more important to me. I've been doing this every day. I've lived, breathed, and slept this war for 581 days now. You know, and I've, like, you know, not to toot our own whistle, but no one has covered the war like we do. Like, there are people who make videos on the war daily, but I don't really know of a lot of people, and I think we may be one of the few people out there, just live, eat, and sleep this war every single free moment of the day. We do that every day. And that's something that really makes me feel connected and attached, is because I've watched this war since day one. I've watched it since the first hour. The first missile that landed in Kyiv, that's when I started looking at the war, and I haven't looked back since. I've practically seen everything that's ever happened in the war on film go down. I've seen almost every single person who's ever died in this war, which a lot of y'all don't get to see because it's not put on air. I've seen almost every single person on both sides who has died in this war on film die. It is a big thing to me because I've just watched so much of it happen. In the background, I really do know how bad it is. The war, of course, and so I feel very dedicated to just keep this thing running nonstop, regardless of what it takes or how much is going on in the background. We did this at UAB as well. We went to UAB in undergrad, and I was, of course, going all out then, 15 full credit hours every semester, spring, summer, and fall, and I just kept this thing running because it meant a lot to me. I have friends over there in Ukraine, and I know one of them very well because he went to high school in America as a foreign exchange student, where I went to high school, and I got to know him very well, got to talk to him, and everyone else I know had generally had some connection to Ukraine. Either they were over there, or they had friends that were over there, and so it was a big deal to me at the beginning to cover the war because I actually know folks over there. It wasn't something that I picked up because it was the trendy thing. I just picked it up because I knew friends over there that I wanted to help out by covering the news of the war. And then after about the first 2 weeks, it shifted from that just covering the news for everyone who wanted to hear what was going on over there. But that's largely why I'm connected to it, is because largely while we keep it very positive on air, I actually almost have a completely different mindset off air. The war is a terrible thing, and I feel very bad looking away from it for a moment and just taking a break to, you know, have a mental health day or take care of myself, because when you actually know and see everything that goes on over there, it's like, damn, I feel pretty guilty just having a free moment of fun times, because you know that a lot of people over there, hundreds of thousands of them, are not having that opportunity at all at any given point. And so that's why I'm really dedicated to it. And on top of that, the amount of support and aid that we've been able to give to Ukraine, the 1.2 million that we've raised through fundraisers, has definitely helped to ease the suffering of many Ukrainians over there. Of course, we don't know the exact count because it's a YouTube Give fundraiser, so YouTube just gives all of the fundraiser support that everyone's raised on YouTube in one giant lump sum to that nonprofit, from what I understand, monthly. So at like the end of every month, they just give the giant lump sum to them. So they don't know it's from the LSA, but I know that the support they've been getting from everyone around the world, including the massive support from the LSA, has certainly helped for some Ukrainians' lives to be saved, changed, or turned around for the better over this war. And so that's largely why I've been into the war so much. And that's also why I've never really taken a break. You know, a lot of people are like, you need to take a vacation. And I'll be completely honest. I'll be completely frank with you all. I am burned out. I've been burned out for months at this point on this war because it's just been mentally exhausting to keep everything going. And especially with law school going, it is just grueling to try and keep this thing going. But at the same time, I can't turn away and just go, I'm going to take care of myself and just go do my own thing, because I feel like that's very self-centered of me, especially knowing what goes on over there and seeing everything on film that happens to the Ukrainian people. It just feels messed up. And so that's why I'm so dedicated to it. If you were wondering, Frank the Tank, in all honesty, that's kind of the actual lay of the land right now. And so with that, thank you so much once again for the support. And also, really cool to know we have attorneys watching in the chat. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Junebug72, who puts in a $21 donation. And thank you very much, Junebug, for that support. And she says, hello, and please just use us for a live chat, and have a great stream. And Slav Ukraine.
And Slav Ukraine. And thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you so much once again for being here with us tonight. It means a lot to us that folks like you who are channel legends are here with us tonight. And thank you so much once again for enjoying the channel and supporting us to help us to keep this thing running. And so with that, let's get the live chat.
And the live chat question is going to go to Spartion, who says, will the winter affect the battlefield the same in Melitopol as Bakhmut?
It probably will. The weather is fairly consistent over there because it's not actually that large of a geographical area. It's only about, I believe, 100 miles distance in between Bakhmut and Melitopol. Let's just measure that real quick and find out. Measuring tape. Boop. And actually, it's about 170 miles. So it actually is a little bit of geographical distance, but I don't think the weather will be that different in between Melitopol and Bakhmut. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat and helping us to keep this thing running. And with that, I see Charles Martel and Barry Woodward, both channel legends, saying, once you hit some kind of a mental wall by working too much, and if you don't take, number one, first, the LSA will not exist, take a break, refresh, and let go. That's something I can't do. I'm either all the way on or all the way off when it comes to something. And I would rather make sure that, to my own detriment, we continue to cover the war and make sure to keep people's eyes on Ukraine, then take a break off, because it means a lot to me. You know, regardless of, you know, what people say out there or what people want to talk about, I do care about the war. That's why I've done this for 6 days a week without a break. And the only time I've ever had a break was Thanksgiving for 2 days and Christmas for 1 day. And then when Matthew got sick, I think 2 days we had to cancel streams because he got sick. Those are the only breaks I have ever optionally taken the entire time I've run this channel for 581 days. So I've gotten like 4 or 5 days off over nearly 2 years. And I'm perfectly fine with that. And honestly, it felt bad even taking those days off. And while I might get exhausted, and while I might get burned out, it's only a matter of powering through. And I feel like it's much better to power through and make sure that all of y'all continue to support Ukraine through all the fundraisers that we run, and also to keep y'all's eyes on the news, because I know that many of y'all apparently only get y'all's news here now. So that's, you know, tens of thousands of y'all that I have to think about each and every day. I would rather make sure that y'all pay attention to it consistently, even at my own detriment, because it will end up helping the Ukrainian people by the end of it all. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. Mark Yanye said, enforcers have Monday off. Mondays are really like maintenance days. We don't really have the day off then. We just kind of focus on everything in the background we weren't able to tend to for the other 6 days, and then we get right back at it again. But with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Santiago Flores, who puts in a $20 donation. And thank you very much, Santiago, for that support. And he said, good evening, and for the pizza and coffee fund for law school. And please pick a question from that chat.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support, Santiago Flores, and thank you for being here with us tonight. Another channel legend. And thank you so much once again for helping us keep the thing running. We will make sure to have some pizza and coffee on you. Not on you, like physically, but on you as in the support. But thank you so much once again. And we will make sure to pick a question from the chat. But thank you for being here with us tonight. And what do we got, Matthew?
And this question from the chat goes to Barry Woodward, who says, what actions from North Korea will cause this channel to report on that new front? We'll report on that thing when we have to wipe them out if they do something stupid. But Enforcer, what say you?
What I say is we'll start reporting on North Korea when we start greasing them. When we start greasing them, that's when we're going to start greasing the news treads on that front. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, Barry. Until then, we're not going to cover it because we've tried covering North Korea before, and it just seemed like no one really cared. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I don't mean that to, deride people for not caring. It's just that so many people have heard so much about North Korea forever that they kind of have become numb to the news. The news about North Korea. So it's, not really anything worth covering until something big happens over there, and then we'll start covering it. But with that, hope that does address that fairly well. Thank you so much, Santiago, for sponsoring that live chat. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat is going to go to Duncan VR, the channel legend, who puts in a $24 donation. And thank you very much, Duncan, for that support. And it is time for animal noises. He says, "Ba moo ba, quack, ba moo moo." Because you leave a liking, ba moo ba ba. Ant noise, man. I don't know what an ant sounds like. I got to tell you, oh man, ba moo moo. LSA chat. Man, what the hell?
That was an ant noise. I don't know what that was. That was supposed to be an ant noise.
Dang, man. He says, type moo, quack now if you like the show. And baba, oh, man, I'm telling you. Zoink, scoob, baba, meow, roof, quack, no respect. Oh, man, bah.
Geschnick, like
all the animal noises going on tonight.
And thank you so much for the support, Duncan VR. Absolute legend throwing in the animal noises. And of course, we appreciate you greatly. The animal noises you bring as well. They're greatly appreciated here on this channel. Of course, a channel tradition at this point, nearly nightly. And of course, thank you so much for giving a shout out to the LSA. Put an LSA in the chat if you're a member of the LSA. That ought to be all of you. We ought to see 4,330 LSAs in the live chat here in a minute. Hopefully. But still, thank you so much once again for the support, Duncan VR, and being a legend. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and up next we have a $20 super chat from SY Tiger 907, and thank you very much for that support as well. That is our friend from Unalakleet, Alaska, who says, "Here soon, I'll be going to Tashkent Bay, and then after be going to Selawik, and hopefully these jobs are nothing like the last one."
And thank you for being here with us tonight, our great Alaskan friend, and he is going to Tashkent Bay. I hate to tell you, man, you're in for the same thing. This looks like Unalakleet to me. Let's see if we got a street view. Oh, no.
It sounded like somebody wanted to call this place Toxic Bay, but they tried to, lighten the load a little bit, and they called it Tashkent Bay.
Yeah, it kind of does. Where is this? Okay, so it's actually further south from Unalakleet. Unalakleet was up here. I hate to tell you, man. I don't mean to be the bearer of bad news, but this is worse than Unalakleet because it doesn't even have a street view, and that tells me that it must be so remote they can't even get a car in there. I'm so sorry for you. I wish you the best of luck. I hope that things go well. It looks like this is also a National Guard outpost of some kind. It looks like it. But goodness gracious, best of luck to you, man. I hate to tell you. I hate to be the one to say that. But hopefully it will be better. I don't know. Maybe they just don't have a street view for some reason. But hopefully it will be better than the last place. But that's what it looks like. So prepare, SYI. But still, thank you so much for the support and being here with us tonight. And I hope you have an internet connection up there in Tashkent Bay. So that way you can watch the channel from there as well. But still, thank you once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And thank you for being new, but also really cool member of the Lee Spring Army, living in the Alaskan frontier for the most part. But of course, right now in Anchorage. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again.
And our next one goes to Vadim Rosenberg, who puts in a 20 and says, "Hello from San Francisco, and formerly from Ukraine 34 years ago, and thank you for your work."
Hey, and really cool. Hello, Vadim from San Fran. You know, Matthew, the Californians don't call San Francisco, they call it San Fran.
Really?
Yeah,
I've heard some people call it other things too.
Well, I've heard some things ghetto, shithole. I'm just
I've heard hellhole a lot.
I'm just kidding. I'm just playing. Because everyone says that. Like earlier in the stream, I sat there and said, hey, someone's from Bakersfield. And then I went to Bakersfield and I saw like 3 people in the live chat say, it's a shithole. And you hear that about everywhere at this point. I don't even know if it's true on some places, most places even. But every single city in the nation has the nickname of being a crappy place. So I don't even know if it's true at this point. I'm going to have to go to San Francisco and find out. But still, really cool to hear that we do have a viewer from San Francisco that was from Ukraine 34 years ago. And thank you so much for enjoying this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Because folks like you make it possible. And tell us, because you actually would know. Like, if anyone's going to know, you would know, Vadim. Is San Francisco a nice place? Because I would love to know. I would, like, eventually I want to go see California because so many people say things about it. And I would love to know if it is, you know, nice or not nice or what. I would kind of like to be prepared for what may be in store. Also, look at the grids, man. They got those grids lined up. Like,
good lord. Now that's the type of grid system right there I don't like. That looks depressing.
I don't know what it is. Like, when grids are perfectly square, they kind of look neat. But when they're rectangular like this, I don't know. For some reason, it gives me a bad vibe. I don't know how to explain that, but someone could sort that out psychologically. And also, I heard someone say they don't call it San Fran, and then a lot of other people are calling it San Fran. So I don't know. Maybe it's San Fran, San Francisco, Cisco. Some people say it's Cisco. But anyways, with that, thank you so much once again for support, Vadim Rosenberg, and helping this channel to keep on running. And please, let us know in the live chat. Is it nice or is it not? I would love to hear from you, considering you're from there. But with that, we are on to the next one. And thank you so much once again for the support.
All right, and up next, we have a $20 donation from Bruce Clunch. And thank you very much, Bruce, for that support. And he says, I love the reports that you guys make. And thank you very much.
And thank you so much for enjoying our reports and helping us to keep this channel running. Because folks like you who support this channel, you make it possible. And so with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Wubba, who puts in a 20 and says, playing guitar and watching the stream. Woo! LSA, LSA.
Hey, and really cool to hear that you're playing guitar. I hope you enjoy playing that guitar. And also, I always wanted to learn how to play the guitar, but I never did. I ended up playing the balalaika, which is actually like a Eastern European little like 3-string guitar. But still, thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And I hope I was able to address that fairly well. And with that, we're on to the next one. But I hope you've been enjoying playing the guitar and watching the stream at the same time. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Still Thinking, who puts in a 20 and says, hello, Enforcer Brothers, and longtime viewer. And yes, you are. And they said, keep up the good work and take one from the chat.
Hey, thank you so much for the support. Thank you for being a longtime viewer and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take one from the chat. And Still Thinking, we would never forget you. You have been around, I know, since day 4. I remember you being around way back then. And so thank you for being a longtime viewer and, of course, an old guard of the Lee Spring Army. And we will make sure to get a live chat. And so with that, what do we got? And also, Happy Dragon just said, and the bagpipes. Yeah, if y'all actually knew how many instruments I play, it's really weird. Matty can tell you. I can play the balalaika, the trumpet, the accordion, the bagpipes. Let's see, what else? Tin whistle, which doesn't really count to me. And there's a whole bunch of others. I have the banjo, but I can't really play that well. But loads of instruments. I used to be really big into playing all kinds of instruments. Almost got a hurdy-gurdy, but then I didn't because they're freaking expensive. But with that, let's get that live chat.
And the live chat question goes to Andre, who says, is Uzbekistan subservient to Putin?
Kind of, sort of. It depends on who you're asking. At this day and age, a lot of people like to think it's neutral, but I'd have to say it kind of leans more so into the Russian sphere than any. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, at least in my opinion. And thank you so much once again for sponsoring that live chat. And so with that, we're on to the next one. Thank you once again for the support.
And the next one goes to Rad Doctor, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much for that support. And he said, if you could go back in time only once, would you stop Hitler or Putin?
Honestly, I would have to go with the third option there. I would go and stop Mao. Because out of all of them...
Mao?
Yeah, you know, Chairman Mao of the Communist Party of China. I would actually
But man, that's not an option. You're putting an option
I mean,
there. It's not an option.
Yeah, I know, but I'm throwing in my own one here because that guy was the guy who actually ended up killing the most people. He killed 40 million people. by his own poor policymaking. And by that alone, if you stopped him, you'd actually be doing more good for the world, probably, than stopping the other two, at least in terms of lives saved. But if I had to pick in between those two, at the moment, while Putin is just horrendous, I'd actually have to say Hitler, because Hitler ended up having 11 million people killed by his own personal order, and Putin hasn't gotten up to that level yet. So I would say Putin. Oh, well, actually, I would say Hitler. In between those two options, at least right now. And also, Oak, let me sign. Okay, let me sign up. I said Oak, let me sign. Okay, let me sign up. I said stopping Hitler could eventually also stop Putin. That's probably true. That probably would eventually stop Putin. So stopping Hitler would kind of stop a lot of things in the world. But with that, thank you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that hypothetical fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Bud, who puts in a 20 and says, do you know the migration history from Ukraine to North America? And Canada has slightly more Ukrainians than the U.S. despite our small population. We love Ukraine. And is there a story to that? Mike Bud from Windsor, Ontario, Canada.
Hey, really cool to hear you're from Windsor in Ontario. I know where that is. Windsor, it's down here somewhere, isn't it? I don't know where it is. Windsor, damn it. Oh, let me find it. Windsor, Ontario. Oh, it was right freaking there. I was right. It was right there. It's right across the river from Detroit. Yes, really cool to know that you were from Windsor. And I actually don't know the migration patterns that led to a lot of Ukrainians going to Canada. It's a thing, though. Y'all actually have massive Ukrainian populations in Canada, but I have no idea what led to that. And so with that, thank you for the support. I'm going to have to actually declare ignorance on that for the most part. But, of course, thank you for being a huge supporter of the channel and helping us to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one. But thank you so much once again.
And the next one goes to George Ferguson, who puts in a 10 and says, has Russia moved its ships into the sea above? And if so, will Ukraine start moving grain again?
Russia has not moved its ships into the sea above. They're all still in the Black Sea in some area. But they are moving grain because they can no longer enforce the blockade due to significant losses. And so with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from SYI Tiger 907, who says, SYI says, seek your impressiveness. I did not know. That's pretty cool.
Man, SYI sounded like a Cliff Bar. Like he sounded like the same. Well, wait, hang on. That's what SYI Tiger stands for. Oh, now I get it. But thank you so much for the support, SYI. That sounds like a very good slogan for a company. But still, thank you so much for the support and helping the channel to keep on running. And I hope I addressed that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a 10 from Flash1 who says, good day. Do you think Americans' mad dash out of Afghanistan had anything to do with an upcoming war in Ukraine? And go LSA.
Nah, and I thank you for the support, but Ukraine had its own catalyst that led it to happen. And that catalyst was when Ukraine tried to join NATO. That's what freaked Russia out. And I know a lot of people are going to say, you really think the war started for that? Yes, it did, because the Russians were scared that if Ukraine joined NATO, we were going to find a way to kick them out in Crimea and block their little warm water port suite deal going on. And then also, Western forces would be within striking distance of the Volga River at Volgograd, and also would have a second lane to Moscow. So it freaked them out, and then that's what caused that catalyst. It didn't really have anything to do with Afghanistan at all. It's just that the timing was a little bit coincidental that it happened right after the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But with that, thank you so much for the support. I hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Margaret Hemsley, who puts in an 8 and says, whatever happened to that young gamer who gave away military secrets and used us to buy ice cream? And Elsa, best community, and you both are the legends. And thank you very much, Margaret. I don't know what happened to that guy. He seemed to like disappear out of the media coverage for some reason. I'm not sure if maybe it's something having to do with the classification of the materials that he allegedly got. Maybe it's gone into private proceedings or something, but it's kind of weird it dropped off. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to declare ignorance on that too. He kind of just disappeared off the face of the earth, and you're the first person to really bring it up to remind me that that happened. But in all honesty, I would have no idea. And also, a lot of people have been joking around about the War Thunder people leaking top secrets, and that's something that did happen. And a lot of them get in huge trouble for that. But sadly, I don't know about that specific guy who ended up getting like raided by, I think it was the FBI at his house in Massachusetts. It ended up getting arrested, and then he just disappeared off the face of the earth. He's probably in Guantanamo. I'm just kidding. I don't know. But still, thank you for the support, Margaret, and helping the channel to keep on running. And thank you for saying we're legends, because you, Margaret, a channel legend for real, is the real legend. And I always say corny stuff like that, but I want you to know y'all are incredibly special, especially for being around for so long like you, Margaret. But still, thank you so much once again. Hope that does address that fairly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Rotormax, who puts in a 10 and says, well said, Enforcer, your coverage is exceptional. And your coverage yesterday of the lady that hid the Ukrainian soldiers in her basement really brings the truth out. Thanks.
And thank you so much for the support, Rotormax, and enjoying the channel. Of course, your support helps us to be able to do this as a job, so we can cover stories like that. And thank you for saying the coverage is exceptional. We try our best to make sure that the coverage is as best as it can possibly be on kind of the limited timetable we're working with to get this news put out. And I'm glad to know that so many people like you, Rotormax, find it to be worthwhile and also worthy enough to support, so that way you can help us to keep doing our work of covering the news the way we do. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that fairly well. And also, that was a really crazy story, and that was one I felt like we had to cover. It was just too insane from start to finish. But with that, thank you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And the next one goes to Ed B, who puts in a 10 and says, you guys know your hardware and do your research, and the laughs are priceless, and shoigu!
And shoigu! And thank you so much for the support and enjoying the channel. I'm glad to know that people do like the jokes. That's probably like the critics' biggest critique of the channel, is that we joke a lot, and I feel like that's what makes our channel exceptional, is that we actually try and keep things light so that it's actually watchable. And so I thank you so much once again for the support and enjoying this channel and enjoying who we are and supporting us, so that way we can stay on air and keep being who we are. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that really well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and the next one goes to Certify, who puts in a 5 and does not leave a comment. And also, like, get rid of this clown in here in the live chat that's talking about the coverage is one-sided. We are pro-Ukraine. Everybody knows that. But thank you very much, Certify, for that support. And sadly, no comment to address from Certify, but we do appreciate it very much. And up next, we have a 5 from Wubba, who says another 5er for the Roll It Fund after all that coffee and pizza.
Hey, I like it. I appreciate it. Thank you so much for the roll. It's fun. And thank you so much once again for the support, Wubba. Also, a channel legend as well. And so with that, thank you so much once again. And also, that guy, Matthew, who said, oh, this is one-sided. It's like, we're pro-Ukrainian. It's like, what do you expect us to do? That's like going back in the World War II to radio channels saying, gee, you guys covering the news about the Allies are one-sided. Why don't you give Germany a chance a little, huh? It's like, what type of idiot is that? It's like, get him out of here.
I'm telling you, man. I'm telling you, these bots are getting crazy these days.
Man,
they're coming in and saying, oh, you're one-sided on you. Oh, what's going on? I said, you get no respect right here. Get the hell out.
Oh, man, I'm telling you. But with that, thank you once again for support, Wubba, and we are on to the next one.
All right, and with that being said, we're moving on to our live chat questions. And we have our Morse code decoders of the stream: Cliff Simonson, Mark Hodges, Earl Bernew, Paul Shelton, Tightlines LSO. They said, beep, beep, boop, boop, gotta get that door, boop, doop. Long live the LSA, Slav LSA, and Slav Ukraine.
And that's the sound of money, and y'all got that dead on the nail again. That was the Morse code message of the night, and I gotta say, really impressive to see that y'all got it once again on the 581st day of the war. And so with that, I hope we addressed that fairly well, and due to time constraints tonight, we're only going to be able to get 3 live chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding out tonight's stream. And so with that, we are on to the first one.
This one goes to Fethdar, who says, which is the biggest explosion of the war?
The biggest explosion of the war so far was probably the... Let me think. It's actually a tough one because there's been so many of them.
The Moab.
Yeah, well, let's see here. I can't think of it right now off the top of my head. There was an explosion, though, that really rocked the whole world for a little bit that came from Ukraine. I think it was probably one of the nitric acid facilities that got blown up. The nitric acid coke thing, you know, that joke came from. I think that may have been one of the largest explosions of the war, but I can't really remember exactly. So I'll say that for now, but, you know, don't quote me on that one. I'll have to make sure. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, and we are on to the second to last question of the night.
All right, and this one goes to Mike Maybe, who says, did you see the video of the Russian military plane in Mali? It ran off the end of the runway and totally destroyed.
Man, did I see that Russian plane sipping Molly? No. But,
Man.
I would say I actually have not seen that video in all seriousness. And if you could share that with us, I'd be very appreciative and would love to see it. And so with that, I hope that does address that fairly well. And we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this viewer is Barry Woodward, who says, how much gunpowder is left in the world and how is it derived for use in war munitions? Can Russia maintain this pace?
Oh my lord. Barry, you're asking a question that I would have to be like an omnipotent being to answer. I don't really know how much gunpowder there is in the world. I hope there's enough, because I would like to get some ammo to like at cheap prices. But sadly, I'm gonna have to declare ignorance on that question because I would have no idea of how to even begin answering that question. Such an in-depth and such a large scale one, it would be very hard for me to even get a straight answer to. So because of that, we're gonna get one more final question of the night. Hopefully I can answer that one, and then we'll round out the stream.
All right, and this one goes to, let's see here. This one goes to Barry Woodward once again, who says, if NATO found a legitimate reason to retaliate to Russia and laid an onslaught to disseminate their forces, do you think this would shorten the war up and set an explanation?
I think it would probably shorten the war up a little bit. I don't think it's going to really end the war in Ukraine unless we join on Ukraine's side. But at the same time, if we started to assert war goals in Ukraine, like give back the Crimea, we might see that the Russians get mental and possibly start using nuclear weapons. And so while it might shorten the war, it's also going to shorten the lifespans of almost everyone in the Northern Hemisphere as well. So I would say possibly, if done the right way, but mostly if we got in a war with the Russians and we just flattened them, it probably would go nuclear, and then that would be detrimental to everyone involved. And that's also why we haven't gone to war with them, because we're kind of scared that that might be the way things unfold. But with that, I hope that does address that fairly well, and we have reached the end of tonight's stream. I got to thank every single one of y'all so much once again for being here with us tonight. At the peak, there was 6.2 thousand of y'all watching, and we are entirely honored to know that we were able to run the news for 6.2 thousand of y'all live and 26,000 of y'all over the course of the entire stream. If y'all have enjoyed, please make sure to subscribe and also hit the like button. It helps the stream to get promoted to other people. And also, make sure to comment once the stream ends in the comment section. Just throw something interesting down there and have a discussion with folks. It also helps the channel to get promoted a little further to more folks. But of course, thank you all so much once again for watching. Good night, good luck, stay safe, take care, Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army never dies.
And good night, folks. We'll see you all tomorrow. Be sure to join us then. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroem Slava, Jaga Jaga.
Yes. The Lee Spring Army sends its regards